Section 1. The World Before the Bombs. Origins, Vault Boy, and Vault-Tec Secrets. There is something almost meditative about walking through a ruined world that was so clearly built by people who believed in the future. That is the secret magic hiding inside every corner of the Fallout universe, and it has been there since 1997. The neon signs are still flickering, the pre-war music is still drifting out of dusty radios, and buried in every hallway, every terminal, every throwaway line of dialogue, there is a layer of detail that most people walk right past. Some of these are jokes. Some of them are love letters to old films and forgotten songs. Some of them are the developers quietly writing their own names into history when they thought nobody was looking. This is a list of 150 of those moments. We are going to go slow. There is no rush here. Just settle in. Let the world of the wasteland wash over you, and let each one of these little discoveries unfold at its own pace. Think of it as a long walk through a very old, very strange museum, where every exhibit has a story attached to it, and nobody is checking the clock. Let us begin at the very beginning. Not with the bombs or the vaults or the desolate silence of the post-war world, but with something much smaller and much more quietly extraordinary. A smiling cartoon man giving you a thumbs up. Number 1. The true origin of Vault Boy. Vault Boy has been the face of Fallout since the very first game launched in 1997. He appears on perks, on posters, on Pip-Boys, on merchandise, on the loading screens that have greeted millions of players over nearly 3 decades. He is the mascot of a fictional corporation and the unofficial mascot of an entire franchise. But where did he come from? The in-universe explanation, the one the games and especially the Amazon Prime television series have leaned into, is that Vault Boy was modeled on a real person. In the television show, set within the canonical Fallout universe, we learn that Vault Boy was inspired by a pre-war Hollywood actor named Cooper Howard, who was recruited to model for Vault-Tec's advertising campaigns. Howard posed with that now iconic thumbs-up smile, and from that moment, a legend was born. The grinning figure plastered across every piece of Vault-Tec promotional material was, in a beautiful and devastating twist, based on a man who would eventually discover that Vault-Tec had deliberately engineered the nuclear apocalypse for profit. The real-world origin, however, is a little different. Brian Menze was the artist at Interplay Entertainment, who drew the Vault Boy illustrations for Fallout 2 and later for New Vegas, following in the stylistic footsteps of the original artist, Leonard Boyarsky. Menze and the team at Interplay drew inspiration from Milburn Pennybags, better known as Rich Uncle Pennybags, or simply Mr. Monopoly from the famous board game, and from the cheerful cartoon characters that populated 1950s American advertising. That era of optimism before everything turned very complicated had a particular aesthetic: bright colors, round faces, exaggerated expressions, and a can-do attitude that bordered on delusional. Vault Boy captured all of that perfectly, which is perhaps why he resonates so deeply. He is the face of a civilization that convinced itself everything was fine. Number 2. The Vault Boy's thumb was never about radiation. There has been a persistent fan theory about Vault Boy's thumbs-up gesture for years. The idea goes that the Vault Boy is actually measuring the size of a distant nuclear mushroom cloud against his thumb. The logic is that if a nuclear explosion is smaller than your thumb when held at arm's length, you are far enough away to have some chance of survival and should run. If it is larger, you are in the lethal zone and, well, the story is already over. It is a genuinely compelling theory that fits the darkly satirical tone of the Fallout universe perfectly. A corporation selling optimism while quietly teaching its mascot to gauge your survival chances at a glance is exactly the kind of layered, sinister detail the games revel in. However, Brian Fargo, the executive producer of the original Fallout games, went on record to clarify that the thumbs-up gesture was simply meant to convey a positive attitude. The Vault Boy is, at his core, a cheerleader for the Vault lifestyle, and the thumbs up is straightforwardly a gesture of encouragement. The nuclear cloud theory was never the developer's original intention, and yet the television show appears to deliberately play into the ambiguity, suggesting the creators of the adaptation know what the fan theory has become and chose to honor it. The line between official lore and fan mythology in Fallout has always been wonderfully blurry. Number 3. Vault-Tec's experiments were based on real psychology. The vaults in Fallout are not simply shelters, They are social experiments. Almost every single one was designed with a specific research variable built in, something that would test a particular aspect of human behavior under extreme conditions. Vault 11 required its residents to sacrifice one of their own each year or face the entire vault being exterminated. Vault 21 settled every dispute through gambling. Vault 92 pumped white noise into sleeping inhabitants' quarters to trigger violent outbursts. The list goes on and becomes progressively more disturbing the deeper you go. What is less commonly discussed is how closely some of these experiments mirror real-world psychological and sociological research conducted in the 20th century. The isolation experiments in some vaults echo the sensory deprivation studies that were conducted through the mid-20th century. The social hierarchies that emerged in vaults, like 101 and 81 parallel, the kinds of results Stanford's Philip Zimbardo documented in his famous prison experiment. Vault-Tec's willingness to use human beings as unknowing test subjects directly mirrors the dark history of American medical experimentation programs that were eventually exposed during the latter half of the 20th century. The designers of Fallout were not simply being cruel for entertainment. They were holding up a mirror to real history, and the reflection is not comfortable. Number 4. The special system is hidden in a pre-war pamphlet. Before you are a wanderer, you are a person. And before you are a person, you are a set of numbers on a character creation screen. The special system, which stands for strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck, is one of the most recognized character-building frameworks in all of role-playing games. But the way it is introduced in Fallout 4 is one of those small details that deserves a second look. When you first wake up in Vault 111 and are asked to set your stats, you do not stare at an abstract menu screen. You look down at a worn copy of the Vault-Tec issued booklet called Your S, P-E-C-I-A-L. This is a direct reference to a real-world promotional item that Bethesda created, based on the in-game fiction. The booklet exists as an actual physical object you can hold in your hands, but it is also presented as something that existed in the Fallout universe long before the bombs fell, a piece of Vault-Tec propaganda designed to help Vault residents understand how their abilities would be assessed and trained. The detail that makes it a true Easter egg is the way it connects the meta layer of game design to the narrative layer of the world. You are not just choosing your stats, you are reading propaganda, and the propaganda is for a system that determines your life in the wasteland. The double meaning is quiet and deliberate. Number 5. The Pip-Boy's design evolution and the model numbers. The Pip-Boy, that chunky wrist-mounted computer that every Vault dweller straps to their arm, has appeared in a slightly different form in almost every game. The original Fallout games used the Pip-Boy 2000. Fallout 3 introduced the Pip-Boy 3000. Fallout 4 used the Pip-Boy 3000 Mark IV. Fallout 76 features the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI, a slightly older model, reflecting the fact that Vault 76 was sealed and opened before many of the other vaults in the series. The detail that most players miss is embedded in the prop design philosophy. The Pip-Boy is not simply a convenient HUD device. In the lore, it was a product manufactured by Robco Industries, the same megacorporation responsible for the Protectron robots, the Mr. Handy series, and robotic sentry bots. Robco's fingerprints are everywhere in the wasteland, and every Pip-Boy carries the company's serial number and manufacturing marks on its casing. The television series got its prop team to build physical, wearable versions of the device, and they made sure the model markings were correct, down to the last detail. Hardcore fans noticed immediately. Number 6. The Fallout timeline, diverged in 1947. This one is foundational lore, rather than a hidden Easter egg in the traditional sense, but understanding it completely changes how you see everything in the games. The Fallout universe is not our future. It is an alternate history that branched away from our timeline, sometime around 1947, roughly around the end of World War II. In this divergent history, transistor technology was never miniaturized in the same way. Nuclear power became the dominant energy source. The cultural aesthetics of the late 1940s and 1950s were never superseded by the 1960s counterculture, the digital revolution, or postmodernism. The world froze in a kind of eternal atomic age optimism that eventually turned catastrophic. This explains why every piece of technology in Fallout looks simultaneously advanced and archaic. Computers with vacuum tubes, the size of your fist. Nuclear-powered refrigerators. Robots that look like they belong in a 1950s science fiction paperback. This is not sloppy world building. It is an internally consistent alternate timeline with rules that the developers have maintained with extraordinary care across nearly 3 decades of games. Whenever you spot a television set with a curved screen or a car with enormous tail fins rusting in an intersection, you are looking at the visible evidence of a different history. Number 7. The influence of a canticle for Leibowitz. Before Fallout was Fallout, the people who were designing it were reading. One of the most significant literary influences on the franchise is a 1959 science fiction novel by Walter M. Miller, Jr., called A Canticle for Leibowitz. The book follows a Catholic monastery in the American Southwest as it tries to preserve human knowledge through multiple cycles of civilization collapse and rebuilding over thousands of years. It is a book about memory, about the human tendency to destroy what it builds, and about whether preservation of knowledge is the same thing as preservation of wisdom. The influence shows up in the Brotherhood of Steel's core ideology, a group of technophiles who are simultaneously hoarding and protecting advanced technology while the world burns outside their bunkers. The tension between preservation and progress, between holding on to the past and allowing the future to emerge, runs through every Fallout game. Even the name of the in-game organization is a theological echo. A brotherhood, like a monastic order, living inside a fortress of knowledge while the wasteland churns outside. Miller's shadow is long in the Fallout universe, and it rewards any player who picks up his novel and reads it before or after spending time in the capital wasteland. Number 8. The Coca-Cola and Nuka-Cola connection. Nuka-Cola is Fallout's stand-in for Coca-Cola, and the visual resemblance between the two brands is completely deliberate. The swooping red and white color scheme, the glass bottle silhouette, the enthusiastic advertising campaigns featuring wholesome American families, and the sheer ubiquity of the product across every part of the setting all mirror Coke's real-world dominance of American culture. But there are specific details that go further than simple visual homage. Nuka-Cola Quantum, the glowing blue variant introduced in Fallout 3, was only available as a limited promotional item from 7-Eleven stores in North America at the time of the game's launch in the form of actual blue-colored Slurpees. Bethesda worked with the convenience store chain to bring the in-game product into the real world. The campaign was eccentric and charming and entirely in the spirit of the franchise, which has always been willing to play at the boundary between fiction and reality. Nuka World, the Fallout 4 expansion pack, turned the brand into an entire theme park, and the layers of commentary about consumerism, nostalgia, and the way corporations build emotional loyalty to products that may well be hurting you runs through every corner of that expansion. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment below with where you are in the world and what time it is. It is genuinely wonderful to know that people in different corners of the planet are all settling in for the same quiet journey through these games. And if you have not already subscribed, now is a good time. There are a lot more of these to come. Section 2, the original Wasteland, Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, Easter eggs. The original Fallout, released in October 1997, was not a massive studio production with a $100 million marketing budget. It was a smaller team at Interplay Entertainment, making the spiritual successor to a much older game called Wasteland, working inside constraints that demanded creativity rather than spectacle. The result was a game that was dense with personality, sharp in its satire, and full of moments where the developers' own voices came through clearly. The jokes were drier, the references were more obscure, and the rewards for players who paid attention were considerable. Number 9. The Monty Python and the Holy Grail Village. In Fallout 2, players occasionally stumble into random encounters while traveling across the world map. One of the rarest of these takes you to a small village, populated by characters who speak and behave exactly like the villagers from the famous trial scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They are accusing a woman of being a witch, following the absurd logical chain from the film almost exactly. She weighs the same as a duck, therefore she is made of wood, therefore she is a witch. The developers lifted the dialogue from the film with obvious affection and dropped it into the post-nuclear wastes without apology or explanation. It simply exists there, waiting for players who know the source material. For everyone else, it is merely baffling. Number 10. The Cafe of Broken Dreams. In Fallout 2, there is a special encounter called the Cafe of Broken Dreams, and it is one of the most self-referential moments in the franchise's history. Players arrive at a small, isolated cafe populated by characters from Fallout 1 who were cut from the final game before its release. These are characters who were developed far enough to have dialogue, personalities, and roles in the narrative, but who did not make it into the finished product. The developers placed them in this liminal space, this halfway house between existence and non-existence, as a way of acknowledging the work that went into creating them. One of the inhabitants, a character named Dogmeat, the famous canine companion from the original game who did not survive to Fallout 2's timeline, appears here as a ghost of sorts. It is melancholy and funny and strange all at once, the kind of moment that only works because the developers had already established enough emotional investment in their own fiction to be sentimental about the parts that got left behind. Number 11. The Star Wars reference hidden in the logo. In Fallout 2, if you look at the globe logo in the bottom right corner of the world map screen, you will find two identification codes printed there: L5, AA23, and TK421. Neither of these combinations of letters and numbers has any in-game significance whatsoever, but anyone who has spent serious time with the original Star Wars trilogy will recognize TK421 immediately. It is the identification number of the stormtrooper whose armor Han Solo steals aboard the Death Star in the original film, the same stormtrooper who gets the confused communication on the intercom with Han's desperate improvisation in response. L5, AA23 is a more obscure reference, likely to another piece of science fiction from the same era. The developers slipped these in quietly, in a corner of the screen that most players would never examine closely. Number 12. The Fallout. 1 credits hold shift Easter egg. This one requires a small action to trigger, but the result is worth it. In the original Fallout, if you hold the shift key and click the credits button on the main menu, instead of the standard credits sequence, you are treated to a special alternate version that the development team created for their own amusement. The credits play out with a very different energy from the official version, full of inside jokes, self-deprecating humor, and the kind of collective personality that emerges from a group of people who have spent months of extremely focused work together. Fallout 2 and Fallout Tactics repeated this tradition, using the same button combination to unlock similar hidden developer credit sequences. It is one of those traditions that feels genuinely human. The team is saying, "We made this thing, and we had feelings about making it, and here is the version we made for ourselves." Number 13. Harold, the man with a tree growing out of his head. Harold first appears in Fallout 1 as an unusual character in the hub, a major settlement. He is a mutant, though not a super mutant, with a peculiar growth on his forehead that he refers to as Bob. Between Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, that growth develops further, becoming more clearly plant-like. By the time of Fallout 3, Harold has been living in the capital wasteland for generations, and the growth on his head has become a fully developed tree named Herbert, which has put down roots and expanded into an entire forest called Oasis. Harold himself is now immobile, his body fused with the tree, and he has become a kind of living deity to a small cult of plant worshippers. The journey Harold undergoes across the games is one of the most quietly remarkable pieces of continuous storytelling in the franchise. Most players who encounter him in Fallout 3 have no idea they are meeting someone with a history stretching back to the beginning of the series. But for players who have been there from the start, finding Harold again in Oasis and seeing what has become of him is genuinely affecting, like meeting an old friend who has changed beyond recognition, but whose soul is still visible underneath. Number 14. The Talking Deathclaw in Fallout 2. Deathclaws are among the most feared creatures in the Fallout universe. They are massive, fast, armored, and almost invariably interested in tearing you into several small pieces. So, the discovery that exists inside Fallout 2 is particularly startling. There is a community of intelligent, talking Deathclaws living in a location called Vault-13, who have been given enhanced intelligence through experimental FEV research. They have a leader, a society, names for each other, and a desperate desire to be left alone to live their lives in peace. This community can be wiped out during the course of the game, which the Enclave does in one of the story's darker moments. But if you find them before that point and spend time talking to them, there is a depth to these encounters that cuts against everything you thought you knew about Deathclaws. The developers were interested in the question of what intelligence and consciousness would mean for creatures that were never meant to have them. It is a more philosophically uncomfortable question than it might initially appear, and the game does not resolve it cleanly. Number 15. The alien encounter in the original Fallout. Random encounters in the original Fallout include a peculiar moment in the desert where you stumble across an alien spacecraft that has apparently crashed. The pilot of this craft, a small extraterrestrial being, is lying dead or dying near the wreckage. Near the body, you can find an alien blaster, an extraordinarily powerful energy weapon that feels entirely out of place in a game about the ruins of American civilization. The developers clearly enjoyed putting it there, tucked away in a random encounter, available only to players who were willing to spend serious time wandering the world map. The alien presence in Fallout's universe predates its more developed appearances in later games, and this tiny moment in the original is where the tradition began. Number 16. Dogmeat's first appearance and the Mad Max connection. The very first version of Dogmeat, the lovable canine companion who has appeared in multiple forms across the Fallout series, was inspired directly by the dog in the original Mad Max trilogy. The influence was not subtle. The original Dogmeat found in Fallout 1 is specifically located in a junkyard, which mirrors the location and mood of Max's dog in the films. And the character's visual design was clearly informed by the Australian film series that had been using the post-apocalyptic setting for action and drama since 1979. Dogmeat in Fallout 1 can be brought along as a companion, but unlike later versions of the character, this Dogmeat could be killed and was gone permanently if that happened. The game saved in a way that was unforgiving about the loss, and many early players experienced the grief of an in-game dog death in a way that lingered. The tradition of bringing back some version of Dogmeat in later entries, particularly the extraordinarily well-realized German Shepherd companion in Fallout 4, is in part an acknowledgement of how much that original canine companion meant to players who were there from the beginning. Number 17. New Reno's film noir architecture. Fallout 2's New Reno is the most film noir location in the franchise's history. It is a city controlled by 4 rival crime families, thick with prostitution, drug dealing, gambling, and violence, where the player can take jobs that range from underground boxing to murder for hire. The entire aesthetic of the location is lifted from classic gangster films and hard-boiled detective fiction, with Humphrey Bogart looming somewhere just off-screen in every alley. But there are specific references buried in the families themselves. The Salvatores, the Mordinos, the Bishops, and the Wrights are each inspired by specific archetypes from crime fiction and film. Some dialogue options with these characters include direct quotes or paraphrases from specific movies and novels. The level of commitment to the aesthetic goes beyond set dressing and into the actual mechanics of how the criminal ecosystem in the city operates. Fallout 2's developers were clearly doing their research, and New Reno rewards players who arrive having already read Raymond Chandler. Number 18. The tanker in San Francisco and Navarro's hidden entrance. Fallout 2's endgame takes place partly in San Francisco, and one of the stranger locations there is an enormous oil tanker called the PMV Valdez, an obvious reference to the real Exxon Valdez oil spill disaster of 1989. The ship has been converted into a floating settlement by a cult of technology worshippers called the Hubologists, who bear a more than passing resemblance to Scientology in their organizational structure, their commitment to secrets, and their belief that they are preparing for a journey to another world. This particular satirical target was bold enough in 1998 that it caused some internal discussion within Interplay, but it stayed in the game. Hidden not far from San Francisco is the Enclave outpost at Navarro, one of the franchise's first extended looks at the sinister government organization that would become the primary antagonist of Fallout 2. The entrance is concealed. The guards are actively hostile to strangers, and the location rewards players who take the time to find the right disguise before attempting to enter. The design philosophy of rewarding player creativity and lateral thinking over brute force is one of the defining characteristics of the early Fallout games, and Navarro is one of its purest expressions. Number 19. The crash site of the original Vault, 13 Dwellers Tribe. Deep in the backstory of Fallout 2, the player character is a descendant of the original Vault Dweller from the first game, living in a tribal community called Arroyo. This community was founded by the Vault Dweller after the events of the first game, and the evidence of its founding and early history is scattered throughout the location in environmental details and fragments of dialogue. This is Fallout's version of multi-generational storytelling. The actions of the protagonist in the first game had consequences that ripple forward into the future, and those consequences are the soil in which the second game's story grows. The detail that catches careful players off guard is the way Arroyo's technology mixes tribal craftsmanship with Vault artifacts. A leather football shaped into armor, Vault-branded equipment repurposed for hunting and survival. These visual details tell the story of a community that remembered where it came from, but had to adapt to where it found itself, which is also more or less the story of every human civilization that has ever had to rebuild from scratch. Number 20. The Children of the Cathedral and H.P. Lovecraft. Long before the Dunwich building in Fallout 3 made the Lovecraft connection explicit, Fallout 1 was already drawing from the same well. The Children of the Cathedral, a cult operating in the hub and elsewhere, has the visual language and ideological structure of a deeply unnatural religious organization. Their cathedral is built above something terrible. Their leader, the Master, is a being who has been transformed into something that should not exist, a composite entity fused with organic and mechanical matter, whose intelligence has expanded beyond human limits and whose sanity has not kept pace. He is brilliant and coherent and completely wrong about what he is doing, which is the most Lovecraftian character type there is. The cosmic horror in Fallout 1 is dressed in the clothes of post-apocalyptic science fiction, but the underlying emotional register is much closer to the dread that H.P. Lovecraft was reaching for, the terror of a universe that operates by rules indifferent to human survival. Section 3 Capital Wasteland Curiosities. Fallout 3 Hidden Gems. Fallout 3 was the game that remade the franchise for a new generation. Bethesda took the post-nuclear wasteland and rendered it in 3 dimensions for the first time, creating a ruined Washington, D.C. that was both immediately recognizable and entirely transformed. The Capital Wasteland is full of environmental storytelling, of rooms and corridors and abandoned houses that hold entire silent histories waiting to be read. And it is full of Easter eggs, dozens and dozens of them, planted by a development team that was clearly enthusiastic about hiding things for people to find. Number 21. The Nuka-Cola Quantum Promo and Sierra Petrovita. In the Girder-Shade settlement to the southwest of the Capital Wasteland, a woman named Sierra Petrovita greets you with an enthusiasm for Nuka-Cola that borders on the clinical. She is the ultimate collector, and she wants you to help her complete her collection by finding a bottle of Nuka-Cola Quantum, the rare glowing blue variety. This quest, a Nuka-Cola challenge, is one of the game's many optional side activities, and it rewards you with a significant cap payout if you bring her what she wants. What most players do not know is that Sierra Petrovita was designed as a direct personification of the real-world Nuka-Cola Quantum promotion that Bethesda was running with 11 at the time of Fallout 3's launch. The character was essentially a joke about collector culture and brand obsession disguised as a helpful NPC. Sierra would eventually return in Fallout 4's Nuka World expansion, still alive and still pursuing her consuming hobby, this time chasing hidden Cappy mascot images in the theme park. Crossing paths with her again is a small, warm moment of recognition for players who had been following the franchise for years. Number 22, Vault 92 and the White Noise Experiment. Vault 92, located in the northwest corner of the Capital Wasteland, is one of the franchise's most disturbing vault experiments. The premise is simple and horrifying. Vault 92 was populated almost entirely by musicians and artists, talented people who were told that the vault was a special haven for creative individuals. What they were not told was that the white noise generators installed throughout the vault were designed to trigger violent outbursts in the occupants. testing the limits of aggression, suppression, and control in a contained population. The evidence of what happened to Vault 92 is spread across its terminals and holotapes. You piece together the story from fragments. The first incident, the escalating frequency of violent episodes, the staff's growing alarm, and eventually the catastrophic final breakdown. It is a silent horror story, told entirely through documentation. One of the holotapes you can find belongs to a musician who was absolutely convinced, until very near the end, that the vault was what it claimed to be. Her final recording is genuinely unsettling in the way that only environmental storytelling at its best can be. Number 23. The Oasis of Harold the Treeman. We touched on Harold earlier in the context of his appearance in the original games, but his presence in Fallout 3 deserves its own entry because of how it functions as an Easter egg within the game itself. Harold is encountered in a hidden location called Oasis, which is almost impossible to find unless you specifically hear about it from other characters in the wasteland. The location is a lush green grove, hidden in the capital wasteland's otherwise blasted landscape, and it is there because of Harold's body. His tree, Herbert, has spread seeds across the area and created a small ecosystem. The community living in Oasis has split into factions about what to do with Harold. Some want him to spread further, to let Herbert seed the entire wasteland and perhaps green the world. Others think the mercy thing to do is to end his suffering. Harold himself is deeply tired, having been alive for much longer than any human should be, and he expresses that exhaustion with a kind of mournful humor that is very characteristic of the franchise's emotional register at its best. What the player chooses to do with Harold is a genuine moral question with no clean answer, and the game does not pretend otherwise. Number 24. The Dunwich Building and Lovecraftian Horror. The Dunwich Building, tucked away in the far southwest of the capital wasteland, is one of the most deliberately unsettling locations in all of Fallout 3. Even the name is a Lovecraft reference. Dunwich Horror is the name of one of H.P. Lovecraft's most famous stories, set in the decayed Massachusetts town of Dunwich. The building in Fallout 3 is named the Dunwich Building, and within it, strange things happen to any vault dweller who ventures inside. As you descend through the floors, you begin experiencing vivid waking hallucinations, visions of pre-war rituals, of strange ceremonies, of worship directed at an obelisk covered in writing that should not exist. These flashback sequences build in intensity as you go deeper. At the lowest level, you find a strange altar with a peculiar obelisk at its center. If you interact with it, the voice that speaks to you is ancient and deeply wrong. The Dunwich Building is Fallout 3, at its most genuinely horror-inflected, and it stands out from the rest of the game precisely because of that tonal shift. The developers were clearly interested in exploring what happens when the specific flavor of unease from Lovecraft's fiction is dropped into a nuclear wasteland. Number 25. The Pulp Fiction Safe in Springvale. At the Springvale School, a moderately ruined building that serves as the territory of raiders early in the game, there is a locked safe belonging to a character named Reverend Hargrave. Inside the safe, alongside useful items, is a note. The note contains dialogue lifted directly from Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, specifically from the scene involving Jules Winfield's speech before he executes someone. The biblical quotation that Jules delivers before pulling the trigger, which is itself a paraphrase rather than a direct quote from the Book of Ezekiel, is reproduced on the note in Hargrave's handwriting. The developers slipped it in quietly enough that players who were not familiar with the film could simply take the note as slightly ominous in-game text. Number 26. The Star Wars reference. Aboard Mothership, Zeta. During the Mothership Zeta DLC, you find yourself aboard an alien spacecraft in Earth's orbit, attempting to escape with a small group of abductees from various points in history. At one point in the Among the Stars quest, you find yourself in a waste disposal area of the ship, and the character Sally is working on repairing something nearby. There is a speech option available to you that reads, "What an incredible smell you have discovered." This is Han Solo's line verbatim from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, delivered as the main characters find themselves in the Death Star's garbage compactor. The joke works on multiple levels. You are on a space vessel, you are in what is essentially a waste area, and the line is so specific that it functions simultaneously as an in-game option and a direct wink at the audience. Number 27, McCready's Tuesday. When you first arrive at Little Lamplight, the underground settlement populated entirely by children, you have to deal with its mayor, a kid named McCready, who is not impressed with you and is not at all interested in letting you in. There is a speech challenge available during your conversation with him that reads, "The day I showed up here is the best day of your life. For me, it was Tuesday." This is a direct reference to the 1994 film Street Fighter, specifically to the character M, Bison's line, delivered to Chun-Li. The quote has become something of an internet classic, partly because of the film's agreeably unhinged energy, and finding it tucked into a conversation with a child mayor in a post-nuclear cave system is exactly the kind of tonal whiplash that defines Fallout's sense of humor at its best. McCready, incidentally, grows up to become a potential companion in Fallout 4, having survived the years between games with his personality more or less intact. Number 28. The Bloody Mess of the Children of Atom. Megaton, the settlement built around an unexploded atomic bomb, is one of Fallout 3's most iconic locations. The cult of the Children of Atom, who worship the bomb as a deity, live in Megaton and are one of the game's earliest illustrations of the kind of religious organizations that emerge in the wasteland out of trauma, technological incomprehension, and the very human need to make meaning out of catastrophe. What is less often remarked upon is the way the Children of Atom's theology is internally coherent if you follow its logic all the way through. The bomb in Megaton is their god, a source of divine radiation which they call the gifts of Atom. Radiation in the Fallout universe does genuinely alter living things. The Children of Atom believe that exposure to radiation transforms the faithful into something closer to the divine, and they are not entirely wrong in the sense that ghouls, who are created by extreme radiation exposure, do gain extraordinary longevity. The theology is horrifying, but it is not arbitrary. The developers built a religious worldview with its own internal consistency, and the fact that its conclusions are terrible does not mean the logic is broken. Number 29. The Abraham Lincoln Connection in the Museum of History. The Museum of History in Washington, D.C. is a location you visit fairly early in Fallout 3's main story. It is infested with ghouls. It is also full of exhibits about American history that have survived the nuclear war in various states of preservation. And within it, you find the Lincoln Memorial exhibit, which has been vandalized and partially destroyed by slavers who have taken over the location. The quest that unfolds around this area, involving the underground railroad-like organization dedicated to freeing slaves in the capital wasteland, is an explicit reference to the historical Underground Railroad and to Lincoln's role in the American Civil War. The game is making an uncomfortable comparison that it does not soften. People are being enslaved in the ruins of Washington, D.C., practically within sight of the Lincoln Memorial, and the organization trying to help them is using the same language and structure as the pre-war movement that worked against slavery in America. It is one of the moments in Fallout 3 where the satire has a specific historical weight. Number 30. The nod to Interplay in Chevy Chase. Just outside the Tenley town, Friendship Station in the Chevy Chase area of the Capitol Wasteland, you can find a small public square with a decorative monument. Look closely at the monument, and you will see a bronze globe with a rocket circling it. This is the official logo of Interplay Entertainment, the company that originally created Fallout and published the first two games before financial difficulties forced the sale of the IP to Bethesda. Bethesda included this logo in Fallout 3 as a tribute to Fallout's origins, acknowledging the creative lineage of the franchise even as they were building a new chapter in it. It is a gracious gesture, quietly tucked away where only the most observant players would find it. Number 31. The Goodwill Hunting Math Problem. Inside the CIT ruins, which represent the post-war remains of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, there is a room with a chalkboard and a skeleton next to it. On the chalkboard is a complex mathematical equation. This is a direct reference to the 1997 film Good Will Hunting, in which a similar situation occurs at the fictional Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A complex math problem is left on a hallway chalkboard, and an unexpected person solves it. The skeleton by Fallout 4's chalkboard version suggests that whoever was working on this problem ran out of time in the most final way possible. The joke is bleak and immediately recognizable to anyone who knows the film. Number 32. The Jaws reference. Near Oberlin Station. Southwest of Oberlin Station, along a waterway, you can find a small boat floating in the water. Look more carefully, and the scene assembled around it begins to tell a story. There is a skeleton wearing a bandana propped up on the boat's edge. Beneath the water, there is a shark cage. Somewhere nearby is a giant mutated creature lurking in the depths. This is a recreation of Quint's death scene from Steven Spielberg's Jaws. The terrified fisherman, the boat, the enormous creature, and the sense of being vastly outmatched are all there, translated into the Commonwealth's post-nuclear idiom. It is exactly the kind of detail that rewards players who slow down and examine things carefully, rather than rushing toward the next quest marker. Section 4 Mothership Zeta, The Pit, Point Lookout, Fallout 3 DLC Secrets. The DLC expansions for Fallout 3 push the franchise's world-building in several different directions at once. Mothership Zeta went full science fiction with alien abduction. The Pit built a dark industrial story around a post-war Pittsburgh. Point Lookout took the setting into Southern Gothic horror territory. Each of these expansions carried its own set of Easter eggs and hidden references, often reflecting the specific tone and genre their creators were working in. Number 33. The Legend of Zelda on Mothership Zeta. The main questline of the Mothership Zeta DLC is called The Legend of Zeta. This is a direct reference to The Legend of Zelda, Nintendo's beloved fantasy adventure series. The naming convention appears casual, but given that the DLC's premise involves collecting a crew and undertaking a rescue mission through a series of themed areas aboard an alien spacecraft, the adventure game comparison is actually structurally apt. The naming convention of titling a Zelda game as The Legend of Zelda, followed by a subtitle, has been one of Nintendo's most recognizable branding decisions since the late 1980s. The developers of Mothership Zeta appear to have named their own adventure story after it with conscious affection. Number 34. Invasion of the Body Snatchers on the Alien Ship. Still aboard Mothership Zeta, when you encounter the abominations, the hostile creatures on the ship, there is a specific behavior they exhibit that is lifted directly from the 1956 science fiction horror film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In that film, the alien pod people identify uninfected humans by pointing at them and letting out an inhuman scream, alerting other pod people to the presence of someone who has not yet been replaced. The abominations in Mothership Zeta do exactly this. They point and emit a shrieking alert to notify other creatures of your presence. The developers included an explicit reference to this mechanic in the game's dialogue, having the character Elliot Terkorian specifically suggest it as one possible explanation for what the aliens want with Earth. Number 35. The James Bond reference with Wint and Kid. In the Mothership Zeta expansion, two characters are named Wint and Kid. These names are a direct reference to the two assassins, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, from the James Bond novel and film Diamonds Are Forever. In the Bond story, these two are a pair of professional killers who work together with a cordial, almost domestic efficiency that makes them deeply unsettling. The Fallout version of these characters exists in a much more chaotic environment, but the names are a direct signal to players who are familiar with the Bond canon. Number 36. The Strapping Young Lad. Reference in the presidential sublevel. This one is buried deeply enough that it remains genuinely obscure. In the presidential sublevel, accessible through a quest in the Broken Steel DLC, there is a maintenance terminal with a series of log entries. The very last log entry, at the bottom of the list, contains a reference to the Canadian heavy metal band Strapping Young Lad song called Detox. This is a hyper-specific piece of musical knowledge tucked into the game's fiction by a developer who clearly had strong feelings about the band. Strapping Young Lad was not exactly a mainstream act, and finding their music referenced in a government maintenance log in a Fallout DLC is the kind of detail that feels genuinely personal. Number 37. The Pit's Tricycle and The Shining. In the Pit DLC, which takes place in the ruins of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there are environmental details that echo the visual language of Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation of Stephen King's The Shining. Specifically, there is a child's tricycle placed in a corridor in a way that directly mirrors the iconic shot from the film. The pit is already a disturbing location, and the presence of this reference in the context of its story about children and slavery and terrible choices creates an emotional resonance that goes beyond simple visual homage. Number 38. Point Lookout's punga fruit and the local flavor. The Point Lookout DLC, set in a fictionalized version of the real Point Lookout State Park in Maryland, introduced the punga fruit as a local crop that the swamp folk who inhabit the region cultivate. Point Lookout is full of Southern Gothic atmosphere, bizarre cults, and a landscape that feels genuinely different from the rest of the capital wasteland. The punga fruit, which can be consumed for its mildly irradiated benefits, is also a careful piece of world building. It is a mutation of the real mangrove and tidal plant life that would actually dominate a marshy coastal environment in this part of Maryland. The developers did enough research into the specific ecology of their setting to invent something that feels locally appropriate. Number 39. The Mothership Zeta DevRoom Tribute. Hidden within the data of Mothership Zeta is a small tribute to a member of the Fallout community who had passed away during the game's development. This is a tradition that Bethesda has maintained across multiple titles, finding quiet ways to honor people within the fiction of the game itself, in places where only the most dedicated players would find them. The practice is touching and says something about how seriously the development team takes its relationship with the people who play their games. Number 40. The serial number of the Nostromo. We will return to this in more detail when we reach Fallout 4, but the first instance of the alien connection in the Fallout franchise's DNA actually traces back to the broader Bethesda era, beginning with Fallout 3, where the concept of visiting an alien spacecraft and dealing with its strange technology became a full gameplay scenario. The tradition of hiding specific callouts to Ridley Scott's classic 1979 science fiction horror film runs through the franchise in ways large and small. In Fallout 3's DLC, you are literally aboard a spacecraft. The developers made the extraterrestrial presence part of the canonical Fallout universe with this expansion, and the horror aesthetics of the alien environment owe something to the visual language of the Nostromo's corridors. Section 5. The Mojave's Many Mysteries. Fallout, New Vegas. Core. Game Eggs. Fallout New Vegas was developed by Obsidian Entertainment, a studio populated by many of the original Black Isle developers who had created Fallout 1 and 2. Their return to the franchise after more than a decade produced a game that was both a continuation and a course correction, deeply interested in the moral complexity and political texture that the earlier games had explored and that Fallout 3 had somewhat simplified. New Vegas is also overflowing with Easter eggs, many of them hyper-specific, many of them lovingly obscure, and many of them only accessible if you have chosen the right character trait at the beginning of the game. Number 41. The Wild Wasteland Trait and what it unlocks. The Wild Wasteland trait is one of the first choices you make at the beginning of Fallout New Vegas, and it is entirely optional. Taking it offers no combat advantage whatsoever. What it does is unlock 15 major encounter events throughout the Mojave Wasteland, plus additional dialogue options and smaller alterations that exist nowhere else in the game. These are the Easter egg encounters: Indiana Jones in a fridge, Monty Python holy grenades, alien encounters, and stranger things besides. Without the trait, these locations contain entirely different content, usually something more grounded in the game's regular logic. The design decision to make the fourth wall breaks optional is elegant. If you want the Mojave to feel relatively grounded in its own internal reality, you can have that. If you want it full of winking references to the culture that produced it, you can have that too. Obsidian understood that not every player has the same appetite for this kind of self-referential content, and they built a system that let players opt into it without forcing anyone else to have their immersion disrupted. Number 42. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Southeast of Good Springs, just along the road out of town, there is a refrigerator lying in the desert with its door open. Inside is a skeleton curled in a tight ball, wearing a specific hat. The hat is called the Suave Gambler hat, and it gives you +1 to perception. It looks exactly like Indiana Jones's fedora. This encounter is only visible with the Wild Wasteland trait active. The reference is to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, specifically to the scene where Harrison Ford's character survives a nuclear test explosion by hiding inside a lead-lined refrigerator, which is then launched through the air by the blast wave. The encounter in Fallout New Vegas suggests that Indy's gambit did not, in the end, actually work, and that what remains of the great archaeologist adventurer is a skeleton in a fedora lying in the Mojave Desert. The official game guide names this encounter. We named the dog Indiana, itself a reference to a line from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Number 43. The Monty Python Holy Hand Grenades. Inside one of the church basements at Camp Searchlight, with the Wild Wasteland trait active, you can find 3 Holy Frag grenades. These are a direct reference to the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the medieval comedy, in which a group of knights receive a holy weapon of enormous explosive power from God and have to follow precise ceremonial instructions before deploying it. The joke in the film involves counting to 3, specifically 3, not 2, not 4, before throwing. The Fallout version of the grenades is a functional weapon, more powerful than standard frag grenades, and finding them in a church basement is entirely consistent with the kind of thing Monty Python's medieval world might produce. Number 44. Romanes int Domus in Cottonwood Cove. At Cottonwood Cove, the Legion's river crossing point, graffiti spray-painted on one of the buildings reads, Romanes unt Domus. This is a direct quotation from Monty Python's Life of Brian, in which a Roman centurion corrects a Jewish revolutionary's graffiti on grammatical grounds, forcing him to write out the correct Latin construction of Romans "go home" 100 times. The original graffiti Brian writes, before being corrected, is Romanes ient Domus, which is grammatically incorrect in multiple entertaining ways. Finding it painted on a Roman legion fortification in the Mojave Desert is one of the most specifically targeted jokes in the entire franchise. Number 45. The Lassie's Well reference. With the Wild Wasteland trait and Rex, the cyborg Mojave canine companion, active as your follower, there is an encounter that takes place somewhere east of New Vegas. Rex will approach you and say something with an Aru sound, and through conversation you determine that he is concerned that someone named Little Jimmy has fallen down a well. The well location is marked on your Pip-Boy. When you reach it, you find a child's skeleton at the bottom of the well, along with a mole rat and some ammunition. This is a reference to the legendary American television dog Lassie, who was famous for communicating to the adults around her that something had gone terribly wrong, usually involving her young charge Timmy, having fallen somewhere dangerous. The joke here is that by the time Rex has alerted you and you have traveled to the well, it is far too late. The wasteland is not a place where patient dogs save the day. Number 46. Frank Sinatra and the quest names. Fallout New Vegas is set in and around Las Vegas, and the developers leaned deeply into that setting's cultural associations. The most pervasive of these is the influence of Frank Sinatra, whose relationship with Las Vegas is one of the defining stories of mid-20th century American entertainment. Sinatra's Rat Pack spent years at the Sands Hotel and Casino, and their association with the city became part of its mythology. In New Vegas, a significant number of quest names are direct references to Sinatra songs. Come Fly With Me, Ring-a-Ding-Ding, My Kind of Town, One for My Baby, You'll Know It When It Happens, I Could Make You Care, Don't Make a Beggar of Me, and others are all either Sinatra songs or songs closely associated with his persona. The radio station that serves as New Vegas's background music even features a character called Mr. New Vegas, who speaks in a style that echoes the crooner aesthetic. The entire city is a love letter to a specific era of American entertainment excess, and Sinatra is its presiding spirit. Number 47. Lucky Looter and the Mysterious Stranger's Identity. The mysterious stranger has appeared in some form in almost every Fallout game. He is a trench-coat-wearing gunslinger who materializes occasionally to help you in battle when you have taken the appropriate perk, firing once with devastating precision and then vanishing without a word. In all the games, his identity is never explicitly confirmed. In New Vegas, if you keep your eyes open for subtle clues in dialogue and environmental details, you can piece together fragments of a possible identity, though the game deliberately refuses to make it concrete. One of the most interesting threads is the implication, traced through journals and environmental storytelling, that the mysterious stranger might be a specific character from the franchise's history, a person who has been drifting through the wasteland for an implausibly long time. Whether this is intentional lore or simply the result of players constructing meaning from fragments is itself part of what makes the mystery compelling. Obsidian always seemed more interested in the questions their fiction raised than in the answers. Number 48. Helios 1 and the Archimedes Death Ray. Helios 1 is a solar power plant in the Mojave Wasteland that serves as the location for a major optional quest. When you gain control of the facility and have to choose what to do with its full power output, one of the options available to you is activating a system called Archimedes 2, a military orbital weapon that can be called down once per day to atomize a target location with a concentrated solar beam. The name is a reference to the ancient Greek mathematician and engineer Archimedes, who is said to have designed a heat ray using mirrors to focus sunlight on attacking Roman ships during the siege of Syracuse around 212 BC. Whether this actually worked has been debated by historians for centuries, but the legend of Archimedes using concentrated solar energy as a weapon is part of his mythology. Fallout New Vegas quietly connected that ancient engineering legend to their orbital strike system. There is also a reference to the Greek myth of Helios, the sun deity, who drives the sun's chariot across the sky, built directly into the location's name. Number 49. Goodsprings and the Real Town. Goodsprings is the starting location for Fallout New Vegas, the peaceful town where you recover from your bullet-induced coma at the beginning of the game. It is not a fictional place. Goodsprings is a real unincorporated community in Clark County, Nevada, located about 35 miles southwest of Las Vegas. The real Goodsprings has a population of a few hundred people, a historic hotel, a saloon, and a general store. The Pioneer Saloon in the real Goodsprings is one of the oldest continuously operating saloons in Nevada. The developers of New Vegas clearly visited or researched the real location and used it as the basis for their fictional version, keeping some of the spirit of the place intact. The game's version has its own Pioneer Saloon, its own general store, and that same sense of being a quiet outpost at the edge of a larger, more dangerous world. For players who know to look, there is a particular pleasure in recognizing a real place translated into the post-nuclear future. Number 50. The Satellite Array and Lonesome Road. The satellite dish array at Black Mountain and the various broadcast signals that can be picked up across the Mojave connect to a larger network of storytelling that runs through New Vegas's DLC and culminates in the Lonesome Road expansion. The character of Ulysses, who serves as the narrator and antagonist of Lonesome Road, has left messages in the form of audio recordings scattered across the Mojave for the courier to find throughout the main game. Players who were paying close attention to these fragments before playing the DLC would arrive at Lonesome Road, having already built a partial picture of who Ulysses was and what he wanted. Players who had ignored the side content would find themselves suddenly catching up on a relationship they did not know they had. This kind of environmental and optional narrative thread, where the full picture only emerges for the most attentive players, is one of the things Obsidian's game does better than almost anything else in the franchise. Section 6, Wild Wasteland and the DLC Deep Dives, New Vegas Expansions. The 4 New Vegas DLC expansions are each remarkable pieces of work in their own right. Dead Money is a horror story about obsession. Honest Hearts is a quiet western about faith and survival. Old World Blues is a love letter to science fiction pulp. And Lonesome Road is a meditation on regret and consequence. Each of them contains hidden content, Easter eggs, and references that reward players who take the time to look. Number 51. Stripe, the Deathclaw, in Old World Blues. In Old World Blues, during your exploration of Big MT's research facilities, you can discover the Higgs Village. In the backyard of House 103, there is a doghouse. The doghouse originally belonged to a cybernetic dog named Gabe, who was apparently a research subject in the facility. But Gabe is gone, and his doghouse has been taken over by a small Deathclaw named Stripe. Stripe is tiny as Deathclaws go, but he is fierce, with nearly as many hit points as a legendary tier enemy. The name Stripe is a direct reference to the main antagonist of the 1984 film Gremlins, a creature who begins as a cute fuzzy pet and transforms into something violent and destructive. The detail that completes the reference is where Stripe hangs out relative to the fountain in the area. In Gremlins, the character Stripe is killed when he is exposed to sunlight near a fountain. The Deathclaw Stripe in Old World Blues appears to be deliberately positioned away from the water, as though the designers programmed in a behavioral quirk that mirrors the film's logic. Number 52. The Dogs Playing Poker Painting. Also, in Old World Blues, at the X8 Research Center, if you have the Wild Wasteland trait active, you can find something unusual in the Cyberdog testing area. After passing through the facility, there is a hallway with a window looking into one of the research rooms. Normally, the Cyberdogs in this room are watching an instructional projection on the blackboard for training purposes. With Wild Wasteland, the Cyberdogs are instead sitting around a table with cards, poker chips, and drinks in front of them. This is a direct reference to the series of 18 paintings by artist Cassius Marcellus Coolidge, created between 1894 and 1910, all depicting anthropomorphized dogs sitting around a table playing poker. The paintings, known collectively simply as Dogs Playing Poker, have become one of the most parodied and reproduced images in American popular culture. Number 53. The Courier's Silent Backstory in Old World Blues. One of the most emotionally resonant pieces of content in all of New Vegas is hidden in the dialogue within Old World Blues, specifically in the conversations you can have with your own removed brain, heart, and spine, which have been surgically extracted by the think tank scientists and placed in jars. These organs can speak. Your brain, in particular, has developed its own personality during the DLC, having spent time being stimulated by the think tank's experimental equipment. The conversation you can have with your own brain includes fragments of your character's history before the events of the game, references to things the courier experienced before the story began. These fragments are deliberately incomplete and somewhat contradictory, because the full backstory of the character you have been playing was never fully written, only implied. Asking your removed brain about your past is asking the game itself a question it has been avoiding, and the answer is appropriately partial and strange. Number 54. The Sneakers Passcode in Dead Money. The Dead Money DLC involves extensive puzzle solving in the Sierra Madre Casino, and some of the puzzles involve electronic passcodes. If you find the right terminals, you can discover that the security codes for two of the key systems use specific phrases. The Eastern system's decoded password is "too many secrets." The Western decoded password is "my voice is my passport." Both of these are notable passphrases from the 1992 thriller Sneakers, a film about a group of security experts who get entangled in a conspiracy involving a universal code-breaking device. The passwords are extremely specific references that would mean nothing to anyone who had not seen the film and everything to anyone who had. Number 55. The Seven Dwarfs in Old World Blues. Near the construction site in Old World Blues, with the Wild Wasteland trait active, you can find 7 garden gnomes standing in a group near some red stones, with a number of pickaxes scattered on the ground around them. This is a reference to the Snow White fairy tale, specifically to the 7 dwarfs who are miners living in a forest cottage. The gnomes are a playful stand-in for the dwarfs, and the pickaxes confirm the mining association. It is a whimsical moment in a DLC that is often genuinely unsettling, and the tonal contrast is itself part of Old World Blues' particular flavor of science fiction comedy. Number 56. Honest Heart's Lily of the Valley. In the Honest Hearts DLC, set in Zion National Park in Utah, there is a specific flower that appears in several locations around the map. The Lily of the Valley, which in the real world is a beautiful but toxic plant, appears in Honest Hearts as a harvestable item. Its presence in a DLC that is thematically concerned with spiritual purity, with the violence necessary for survival, and with the costs of faith is not accidental. The lily is traditionally associated with purity and religious meaning in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and it is poisonous. The developers who named this plant and placed it in this specific DLC were making a quiet observation about the double nature of things that appear innocent. Number 57. The Lonesome Road and Ulysses' Namesake. The character of Ulysses, the antagonist of the Lonesome Road DLC, is named after the Roman name for the hero of Homer's Odyssey. The Greek version of the same hero is Odysseus, and the story associated with him is one of the defining stories of Western literature, a man trying to get home after a catastrophic war, navigating monsters and gods, and his own flaws along the way. The thematic connection to Lonesome Road is precise. Ulysses in Fallout New Vegas is a man who has lost everything he loved to forces beyond his control, who has spent years trying to find a path back to something that no longer exists, and who has finally concluded that the only way forward is through destruction. His relationship with the courier is the Lonesome Road's central emotional core, and the layers of meaning in his name add depth to that relationship that pays off most fully for players who know their classical literature. Number 58. The Seymour reference in Lonesome Road. In the Cave of Abaddon, accessible through the Lonesome Road DLC, there is a fossilized dog named Seymour. Seymour is a reference to the dog of the same name from the Futurama episode Jurassic Park, widely considered one of the most emotionally devastating episodes of animated television ever made. In that episode, Fry discovers the fossilized remains of his 20th century dog Seymour, and the episode's ending implies the enormous depth of Seymour's loyalty and grief. Finding a fossilized dog named Seymour in the most desolate and emotionally weighted DLC in the game is a gesture of compassion from the developers toward players who know what that name means. Number 59. The Planet of the Apes. Reference on Boulder City. In Boulder City, during the quest that brings you there early in the main game, you can encounter a scene that echoes the iconic ending of the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. Players who look carefully at the landscape near certain ruined structures might notice debris arranged in a configuration that suggests a large fallen object of human construction. The visual echo is deliberately understated, but for players who know the film's landmark finale image, the resonance is immediate. Number 60. Caesar's Legion and Roman History. Caesar's Legion, the most prominent antagonist faction in Fallout New Vegas, is built on Roman historical references with extraordinary depth. The leader of the Legion is named Caesar, and he is played by the same voice actor who voices the character in the game with a delivery calibrated to suggest someone who genuinely believes they are constructing a civilization. The Legion uses Roman military terminology, organizational structures borrowed from Roman legionary units, and aesthetic elements drawn from Republican Roman culture. But the specific history that Caesar's Legion parallels is not generic Roman history. It is the particular moment of late Republican Rome when the Republic was under extreme stress, when strongmen were claiming emergency powers, and when the old order was collapsing in slow motion. Caesar in the game has clearly read his Suetonius and his Gibbon, and the resonances between his legion's history and the actual historical collapse of Republican Rome are too precise to be accidental. The developers at Obsidian were making a point about how civilizations fail, and they made it through a villain who had read the same history books. Section 7. The Commonwealth's Coded Messages. Fallout 4 Easter Eggs. Fallout 4's Commonwealth, the post-nuclear ruins of Greater Boston, Massachusetts, is a city saturated with history in both real and fictional senses. The real city of Boston is one of America's oldest, full of colonial architecture, Revolutionary War monuments, academic institutions, and working-class neighborhoods that have their own deep historical identities. Bethesda used all of this material and layered their post-nuclear fiction on top of it with considerable care. The result is a game world where Easter eggs can operate on multiple levels simultaneously, as references to the real city's history, as references to the broader history of American culture, and as references to the long tradition of science fiction and film that the franchise has always drawn from. Number 61. The Cheers Easter Egg at Prost Bar. In Diamond City, the main settlement of the Commonwealth, there is a bar called Prost Bar. Prost is the German word for cheers, which is the toast you make when drinking. It is also the name of the long-running American sitcom Cheers, set in a Boston bar where everybody knows your name. The interior of Prost Bar is designed to evoke the aesthetic of the show's fictional bar, complete with skeletons seated at the bar in positions that suggest regulars who never quite made it home. The joke is warm and melancholy at once, which is very much the emotional register of the original show. The regulars of Cheers always had somewhere they would rather not be going back to, and in the Wasteland version, they never had to. Number 62. The Blade Runner Noodle Bar. Power Noodles is a food stall in the central courtyard of Diamond City, run by a robot named Takahashi. Upon greeting any customer, Takahashi asks, "Nanni shimasu ka?" This Japanese phrase means, approximately, "What will you have?" And it is specifically a reference to a scene early in the 1982 science fiction film Blade Runner, in which Harrison Ford's character Rick Deckard stops at a small noodle bar where the man serving him speaks only Japanese and asks the same question. The visual echoes are also there. A lone figure eating at a counter in a rain-washed urban environment, served by someone who communicates primarily through repetition. Number 63. The Blade Runner rooftop scene. The second Blade Runner reference in Fallout 4 requires a bit more effort to find. If you make your way to the roof of the mass fusion containment shed, located between Breakheart Banks and General Atomics Galleria, you will find a scene that replicates the climactic moment of Blade Runner with considerable precision. A humanoid figure sits in a posture of peaceful exhaustion beside the slumped body of another. The positioning mirrors Roy Batty's famous death scene from the film, in which the replicant who has spent the movie as an antagonist becomes, in his final moments, something unexpectedly moving. The reference matters in context because Fallout 4's central thematic question is about what it means to be human, specifically in relation to synthetic beings who may be indistinguishable from organic humans. Blade Runner is one of the canonical explorations of this same question, and placing its most emotionally resonant scene in Fallout 4's world is not casual decoration. It is a statement of thematic intent. Number 64. The Alien Serial Number. Among the items that Scribe Halen asks you to collect for the Brotherhood of Steel is a device called a flux sensor. This item, when examined closely, has an inscription on its reverse side, FLUX Sensor CM 88B180924609. The number 180924609 is the registry number of the USCSS Nostromo, the commercial hauling spacecraft that serves as the setting for the 1979 science fiction horror film Alien. The CM-88B designation is the Nostromo's vessel classification, a Bison M-class commercial star freighter. The developers hid the precise registry data of one of cinema's most famous spacecraft on the back of a piece of junk that most players would pick up, add to their inventory without looking at, and eventually scrap for components. Number 65. Codsworth and the alien character names. Codsworth, your pre-war mister, handy butler who has been maintaining your empty house for 210 years, will call your character by name if you choose from a list of approved options during character creation. The list of names he can recognize is enormous, over 1,000 options, and hidden within it are several specific references to the Alien film franchise. If you name your character Ripley, Codsworth will use it, and it is a direct reference to Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, who is the protagonist of the first 4 Alien films. He will also recognize Dallas, a reference to Arthur Dallas, the captain of the Nostromo. He will recognize Wayland and Yutani, the 2 corporate names that eventually combine into the Wayland-Yutani Corporation, the sinister company whose interests drive the disaster of the original film. Number 66. The Safe Test and the Voight-Kampff Machine. In the Covenant Settlement, a seemingly idyllic community of pre-war-looking houses and cheerful residents, newcomers are required to take a test before being admitted. The test is called the Safe Test, and it is presented as a psychological evaluation. Players who take the test and then reflect on it will notice that its questions are designed to probe the boundary between human emotional response and something more mechanical, something less spontaneous. The test is a direct reference to the Voight-Kampff test from Blade Runner, which is designed to distinguish between humans and replicants by measuring involuntary empathic responses. The Safe Test in Fallout 4 is being used to identify synths, artificial humans, which is the franchise's equivalent of Blade Runner's replicants. Number 67. The Walking Dead reference at Sanctuary Hills. Shortly after leaving Vault 111 and returning to the ruins of Sanctuary Hills, your old neighborhood, you can find a specific scene near the houses. 2 skeletons are positioned in a way that recreates the discovery of a zombie survivor from the early episodes of the Walking Dead television series. The positioning is specific enough that players familiar with the show will recognize the reference immediately, though it is subtle enough that anyone unfamiliar with it would simply see two skeletons in a ruined neighborhood without any additional meaning. Number 68. The Grognak comic tradition. Grognak the Barbarian is a recurring in-universe comic book franchise that appears throughout the Fallout games in various forms. In the original games, reading a Grognak the Barbarian comic would give you a temporary boost to melee combat skill. In Fallout 4, the comics have been expanded into an entire collectible series with specific effects, and the Grognak aesthetic, which is a loving parody of the pulpy sword and sorcery comics that were popular in the mid-20th century, is given its fullest expression with a dedicated Hubris comics store in the game. The Grognak comics are a parody of Conan the Barbarian specifically, and the humor in their covers and titles operates on two levels simultaneously. On the surface, they are funny because of how extreme and self-serious the genre was. At a deeper level, they are a commentary on the way pre-war American popular culture was saturated with violent masculine fantasy, and the juxtaposition of that content with the realities of post-nuclear survival is the joke. Number 69. The Mysterious Stranger's Identity Clues. In Fallout 4, careful players can find holotapes and journals that suggest something about the mysterious stranger's nature and origins. The evidence is never conclusive, maintaining the deliberate ambiguity that has surrounded the character since his first appearance. But there are clues in the Commonwealth that point toward one possible interpretation, specifically that the stranger might be connected to the Institute's experiments in ways that predate the events of the main game. Fallout 4 is a game deeply concerned with identity, with the question of whether people are defined by their origins or their choices, and placing the mysterious stranger in the context of those concerns adds a layer of meaning to his sporadic appearances that was not present in earlier games. Number 70. The Back to the Future reference. Among the items Scribe Halen asks you to find is a device called a reflex capacitor. The name is a transparent rearrangement of flux capacitor, the fictional device from the Back to the Future film series that allows the DeLorean time machine to function. The flux capacitor requires 1.21 gigawatts of power to operate, which is one of the film trilogy's most quoted technical specifications. The Fallout version is named with just enough letter transposition to signal the reference, while maintaining the thinnest possible fictional deniability. Number 71. The Goodwill Hunting Chalkboard at CIT. In the CIT ruins, which represent the post-nuclear remains of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, there is a room with a chalkboard covered in complex mathematical equations. Beside the chalkboard is a skeleton slumped in a chair. The scene is a direct reference to the 1997 film Good Will Hunting, in which a complex math problem is left on a hallway chalkboard at MIT, and an unexpected janitor solves it, revealing a mathematical genius. In the Fallout version, the implication is that someone was working on this problem when the bombs fell, and they did not get to finish it. The skeleton adds a finality that the film's story did not have. Number 72. The Ghostbusters line from Robert McCready. If you are traveling through the Boston Public Library with the companion Robert McCready, a character who first appeared as the young mayor of Little Lamplight in Fallout 3 and has since grown into a wasteland mercenary, he may comment on the unusual stacking of books in certain areas of the library. Specifically, he may say something to the effect that no human being would possibly stack books this way. This is a near-direct quotation from Ghostbusters, in which Peter Venkman's character makes essentially the same observation about the arrangement of food products in Dana Barrett's refrigerator at the beginning of the film, suggesting the presence of supernatural intervention. Number 73. The Krem's Tooth Ritual Knife. Deep in the basement of Dunwich Borers, the quarry and mining operation that serves as Fallout 4's version of the earlier Dunwich building, there is a pool of irradiated water at the very lowest level. At the bottom of this pool is a unique weapon called Krem's Tooth, a jagged ritual knife that deals additional poison and bleeding damage. The name is a reference to Krem Baitak, the mountain in Kremhild Gill, which is itself a place name constructed from the language of Tolkien's invented mythology. But more directly, the name evokes a kind of ancient, unknowable divine presence, the same Lovecraftian register that the Dunwich locations in Fallout have consistently drawn from. The knife is described as sacrificial in its use, and finding it at the bottom of a flooded pit at the end of a horror-inflected dungeon is entirely consistent with the aesthetics of Lovecraftian dark fantasy. Number 74. The Minutemen's Paul Revere Connection. The Minutemen, one of Fallout 4's central factions, take their name and much of their aesthetic identity from the Massachusetts Minutemen who fought in the early battles of the American Revolutionary War, including the battles at Lexington and Concord in 1775. Concord is one of the first major locations in Fallout 4's open world, and it is where you encounter the Minutemen for the first time in the game's modern timeline. The location of this introduction is not accidental. The Concord in Fallout 4 is positioned in the game world as the Concord of the real world was positioned in American history, as the place where the first shots of a larger conflict were fired, where a small group of determined people with limited resources stood against a larger force. The game is drawing a quiet parallel between the American revolutionaries and the Commonwealth's embattled settlers, suggesting that the story of ordinary people defending their communities against organized power is one that repeats across centuries and contexts. Section 8 Far Harbor, Nuka World, and the Deeper Details. Fallout 4 DLC Secrets. The two major Fallout 4 expansions took the game in distinct thematic directions. Far Harbor, set on a fog-shrouded island off the coast of Maine, leaned into mystery, existential horror, and quiet melancholy in ways that the main game's more action-forward tone sometimes avoided. Nuka World went in the opposite direction, building something loud and colorful and deeply satirical around the concept of an irradiated theme park. Both DLCs are full of references and hidden content. Number 75. The Titanic Scene in Far Harbor's Waters. In the waters of Far Harbor, there is a sunken boat near the Fringe Cove docks that can be found by swimming. On the surface of the water near this location, two skeletons are positioned in a pose that directly mirrors the famous scene from James Cameron's 1997 film Titanic. One skeleton is reaching down from an elevated position toward another skeleton floating in the water, exactly as Kate Winslet's character Rose reaches down toward Leonardo DiCaprio's character Jack in the film's climactic sequence. The detail that completes the scene is the presence of enough floating wreckage nearby that the upper skeleton could theoretically have moved to allow both to survive, which is the debate about the film's ending that has been ongoing since its release. Number 76. The Dunwich Borers and the Multi-Game Horror Tradition. Dunwich Borers in Fallout 4 continues the tradition established by the Dunwich Building in Fallout 3, and both of them draw from Lovecraft's Dunwich horror story. But the Fallout 4 version adds an additional layer. As you descend through the levels of the quarry, you find holotapes from raiders and workers who became increasingly disturbed by something deep in the rock before meeting violent ends. The sequence of holotapes is structured as a descending spiral, and the content of each one is darker than the last. At the bottom, the underwater chamber contains not just Kremva's tooth, but also paintings on the rock walls that seem far older than the nuclear war, that seem, in fact, far older than the United States. The implication, maintained carefully through suggestion rather than explicit statement, is that something was down there long before the bombs fell, and that the miners at Dunwich Borers simply dug until they found it. Number 77. The Dark Souls Bonfire in Nuka World. In the Bradburton area of the Nuka World add-on, in a small house in the southern part of the zone, there is a mound of ash with a Chinese officer sword embedded in it. If you light the ash, stimpaks begin to fall from above. This is a direct reference to the bonfire mechanic in the Dark Souls video game series, in which lighting a bonfire at various points through the world provides healing and serves as a respawn point. The visual of a sword embedded in a mound of ash is one of the most recognizable images from the Dark Souls games, and the falling stimpaks serve the same mechanical function as the health restoration bonfires provide. Number 78. The Han Solo Carbonite Scene in Nuka World. In the headquarters of the Disciples faction in Nukatown, USA, if you climb to the very top of their tower structure, you can find a specific set dressing on the ground below. The figure of a man, clearly positioned to evoke the famous scene from Star Wars Return of the Jedi, in which Han Solo is encased in carbonite and hung on the wall of Jabba the Hutt's palace. The Disciples are a raider gang with a flair for theatrical violence, and having something that looks like a carbonite display trophy in their stronghold is entirely consistent with their established aesthetic. Number 79. The Sierra Petrovita Callback. In Nuka World's main quest, you can meet Sierra Petrovita, who originally appeared in Fallout 3 as the woman obsessed with collecting Nuka-Cola Quantum in Rivet City. She is now in Nuka World, working on a new collection project, finding all the hidden Cappy mascot images scattered throughout the park. This callback is one of the most genuinely warming moments of character continuity in the franchise. Sierra survived the years between games, maintained her particular obsession, and found a new and appropriately ambitious target for it. Her quest in Nuka World, Cappy in a Haystack, is a reference to the tradition of finding hidden Mickey images in Disney theme parks, and the fact that she exists as a recurring character across 2 games, separated by years, is a small triumph of long-term world-building. Number 80. The Psycho Shower Scene in Kitty Kingdom. The funhouse in Kitty Kingdom has a spinning room with multiple doors. Behind one of those doors is a room containing a mannequin wielding a combat knife against another mannequin in a pose that directly mirrors the famous shower scene from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The 1960 film's shower scene, in which Janet Leigh's character, Marion Crane, is stabbed to death by a figure in a shower, is one of the most analyzed and referenced moments in cinema history. Finding its mannequin echo behind a random door in a post-nuclear carnival funhouse is entirely in keeping with the franchise's habit of placing the deeply serious next to the absurdly comedic. Number 81. The Deadliest Catch reference in Far Harbor. One of the quests in the Far Harbor DLC is called Deadliest Catch. This is a reference to the long-running Discovery Channel reality television series of the same name, which documents the dangerous work of crab fishermen in the waters off Alaska. In the Far Harbor quest, you are asked to hunt a giant crab creature. The tonal match between the show's premise and the quest's content is precise enough to be clearly intentional, and it is the kind of reference that adds a layer of warmth to what would otherwise be a routine combat assignment. Number 82. Galaxy Quest in Nuka World. In the Safari Adventure Welcome Center of Nuka World, one of Dr. Hines' terminal entries references the 1999 science fiction comedy film Galaxy Quest. Specifically, the journal entry describes polar bears coming out of a Nuka-Gen replicator inside out and then exploding. This is a direct reference to a scene in Galaxy Quest in which an alien creature is transported through the film's fictional digital conveyor system and emerges catastrophically wrong. The joke works as a standalone observation about the dangers of early-stage replication technology, but it rewards viewers who know the specific film it is invoking. Section 9. Appalachia's Hidden Whispers. Fallout 76. Easter eggs. Fallout 76 launched in 2018 with a complicated relationship with the community. But whatever its rocky reception, the game's rendition of West Virginia is filled with careful detail and genuine love for the specific culture and landscape of Appalachia. The developers clearly did extensive research into the real history, folklore, and character of the region, and the Easter eggs in the game reflect that research alongside the franchise's more familiar tradition of pop culture references. Number 83. The most downvoted Reddit comment in history. At the Mount Blair train yard, one of the terminals in the supervisor's office contains a list of employee benefits. One of these benefits is described as a sense of pride and accomplishment. This is a direct reference to what became briefly the most downvoted comment in the history of Reddit, posted by EA Games in November 2017 response to complaints about microtransactions in Star Wars Battlefront 2. The EA community team described the transaction mechanics as providing players with a sense of pride and accomplishment, and the response was so viscerally negative that the comment accumulated hundreds of thousands of downvotes within days, becoming a meme about the gap between corporate language and player experience. Finding this phrase in a fictional corporate workplace document in Fallout 76 is a development team joke aimed squarely at the industry context surrounding game monetization. Number 84. The All Your Base meme. In an unused quest file within Fallout 76, there is a line of dialogue that would have been spoken by a robot called the Interrogatron in the event of the player character's death. The line is, "Assessment. All your secrets are belong to us." This is a modified version of the famous mistranslation from the European port of the 1992 arcade game Zero Wing. All your base are belong to us, which became one of the most widely shared internet memes of the early 2000s. Finding a 20-year-old internet meme adapted for use in a post-nuclear security robot's death dialogue is a very particular kind of inside joke. Number 85. The Titanic reference at Summersville Lake. Near Summersville Lake, in Fallout 76, there is a skeleton positioned on what appears to be a door or large piece of debris floating on or near the water's surface. Another hand reaches up from below. This is another reference to the Titanic scene, executed with the same emotional shorthand as the Fallout 4 version, but in a different setting. The developers clearly enjoyed this reference enough to use it in multiple games, and the decision to place it near a lake rather than ocean gives it a slightly different quality. The water of Summersville Lake reflects the sky, and the skeleton above reaches down in a gesture that looks, from a distance, almost like relief. Number 86. The Pennywise reference at Sugar Grove. At the Sugar Grove Intelligence Facility, in a drainage area nearby, players can find a red balloon tied to a string floating above a sewer entrance. A single red balloon floating near a drainage pipe or sewer grate is the signature image associated with Pennywise, the shape-shifting entity from Stephen King's novel IT, who lures children by appearing to them as a balloon before revealing its true form. The image is simple and specific, and immediately recognizable to anyone who has read the book or seen either the 1990 television adaptation or the 2017 film remake. In the context of a mysterious intelligence facility in post-nuclear Appalachia, it functions as a perfect ambient horror detail. Number 87. The Flatwoods Monster reference. The Flatwoods Monster is a genuine piece of West Virginia folklore. In 1952, in the small town of Flatwoods, several witnesses reported seeing a creature described as hovering, emitting a mist, and having a large spade-shaped head with glowing eyes. The encounter became one of the notable mid-20th century UFO and cryptid cases in American folklore. Fallout 76, set in West Virginia, includes the Flatwoods Monster as an actual creature in the game world, complete with its hovering movement pattern and the eerie visual design suggested by the original witness accounts. The game treats West Virginia's actual folklore with the same seriousness it treats its pop culture references, which gives the Appalachian setting a depth of local identity that sets it apart from the franchise's other wasteland locations. Number 88. The Mothman of Point Pleasant. The Mothman is one of the most famous pieces of American cryptid folklore, and it is specifically a West Virginia legend. Beginning in 1966 and continuing through 1967, residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reported sightings of a large, winged, humanoid creature with red glowing eyes. The sightings became associated in popular memory with a series of local tragedies, most notably the collapse of the Silver Bridge in December 1967. Fallout 76 includes the Mothman as a rare creature that can be encountered across the Appalachian wasteland, sometimes appearing as a hostile enemy and sometimes as a more ambiguous presence. The game also includes Point Pleasant as a specific location, complete with a Mothman museum and various artifacts of the real-world legend. Number 89. The Giant Teapot and the World's Biggest Objects. Tradition. In Fallout 76's Appalachian wasteland, you can find a giant teapot, a colossal ceramic teapot structure that serves as a roadside attraction. This is based on a real tradition in American roadside culture of building enormous novelty structures to attract attention and tourism. The world's largest ball of twine in Darwin, Minnesota. The world's largest rocking chair in Cuba, Missouri. Various giant statues of local animals and historical figures. The giant teapot in the game's lore was apparently considered as part of a competition for the world's largest of several different novelty objects. In the dialogue associated with this location, one character explicitly references the controversy over the world's biggest ball of twine, noting that Kansas already had considerable controversy on that account. It is an extremely specific piece of real-world Americana, translated into the game's post-nuclear fiction. Number 90. The Dev Room. Unauthorized Access Incident. In any game development context, there is typically a developer testing room, a space outside the normal map where all of the game's items and assets are made accessible for quick testing purposes. In single-player games, players can reach these rooms through console commands, but they do not affect the experience of anyone else. In Fallout 76, which is an online game with a shared world, players discovered a way to reach the developer room without using console commands, accessing every item in the game and bringing them back into the regular player space. Bethesda's response involved banning the accounts of some of the players who had accessed the room, then reaching out to them to ask how they had done it, in exchange for the possibility of account reinstatement. This sequence of events, involving a game studio essentially negotiating with the players who had hacked their game, became a widely discussed moment in the gaming press. Number 91. The binary message in Rose's holotape. A holotape belonging to the character Rose in Fallout 76 contains a binary file embedded within its data. When the binary code is translated, it reveals two pieces of information: the string Corey, Treadway, and Ka Treadway, 1Z. These appear to be the username and password credentials of a real developer named Corey Treadway, who worked on the game, accidentally included in the released content. It is not uncommon for developer credentials or test data to end up in shipped game files, but it is rare for the community to notice and decode them. This discovery, made by players who took the time to actually translate binary code from a in-game holotape, is a good example of how far Fallout's most dedicated fans are willing to go. Number 92. The Wendigo and Appalachian folklore. The Wendigo is another piece of indigenous North American folklore that Fallout 76 incorporates into its creature roster. The Wendigo is a being from the folklore of several Algonquian-speaking peoples, associated with extreme cold, starvation, and a specific kind of transgression, cannibalism. The original legend holds that consuming another person's flesh under duress could transform a person into a Wendigo, condemning them to a state of perpetual, insatiable hunger. Fallout 76's Wendigo is rendered as a terrifying humanoid creature with elongated limbs, extreme aggression, and the implication that something essentially human has been transformed by extreme circumstances. The connection to the Appalachian setting, where the legend has some indigenous cultural presence, gives the creature a regional authenticity that complements the Mothman and Flatwoods monster in making West Virginia's particular mythology central to the game's identity. Section 10 Lore Threads and Developer Fingerprints. Cross-game connections. One of the most rewarding aspects of spending time with the Fallout franchise across multiple games is noticing the threads that connect them. Characters who appear in multiple titles, organizations whose histories unfold across decades of in-game time, locations that are visited in different eras and seen in different states of ruin or recovery. These connections are not always obvious, and finding them requires either paying close attention over many hours of playtime or belonging to a community of players who collectively track these details. Number 93. Nick Valentine's Noir Inspiration. Nick Valentine, the synth detective who operates out of Diamond City in Fallout 4, is one of the most carefully constructed characters in the franchise. His visual design, his speech patterns, his trench coat and fedora, his office, and his cases are all drawn from the tradition of hard-boiled detective fiction, specifically from characters like Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, and the broader cultural archetype of the noir detective. But the specific synthesis of his character goes further than visual design. Nick carries memories belonging to a pre-war detective named Nicholas Valentine, memories that were uploaded into a synth body without the original Nick's knowledge or consent, creating an entity that is genuinely uncertain about which of his memories are his own and which belong to a man who died 2 centuries ago. This is the Blade Runner question again, translated into a character study. What are you if your identity is constructed from someone else's archived experiences? Nick Valentine is Fallout 4's most extended meditation on that question, and the fact that he dresses like a film noir detective while grappling with it is both aesthetically coherent and conceptually resonant. The noir tradition has always been interested in identity, in the gap between appearances and realities, in people who are not what they seem. Number 94. The Institute and the Railroad's first appearance in Fallout 3. In Fallout 3, there is a side quest called The Replicated Man, which involves the discovery that an android, an artificial human, has been secretly living in Rivet City, posing as a natural human. This quest introduces both the concept of human-identical synths and the organization called the Railroad, which helps synths escape their creators. When Fallout 4 arrived and both the Institute and the Railroad were presented as major factions, players who had done the Replicated Man in Fallout 3 experienced a moment of recognition that felt like finding an old friend in a new city. These organizations had been operating in the background of the franchise's lore for years before they became central to a game's narrative. Number 95. The Return of Marcus in New Vegas. Marcus is a super mutant character who first appeared in Fallout 2 as the sheriff of a small settlement called Broken Hills. He is intelligent, self-aware, and carries a particular weariness about the state of the world that distinguishes him from the typical super mutant characterization. In Fallout New Vegas, Marcus reappears in the settlement of Jacobstown, now an elderly figure by super mutant standards, having lived through the events of both Fallout 2 and the intervening decades. Finding Marcus in New Vegas is one of the franchise's most rewarding continuity rewards. He remembers the events of the previous game. He has had experiences in the years between. He is genuinely older in a way that matters to his character. This is multi-game character development done with care and patience. Number 96. The Brotherhood of Steel's Fractured History. The Brotherhood of Steel appears in every mainline Fallout game, but it appears differently in each one, and the differences are internally consistent in ways that reward close attention. In the original games, the Brotherhood is a semi-isolated organization of technology hoarders with rigid hierarchy and a deep suspicion of outsiders. By Fallout 3, the Capital Wasteland chapter has become something closer to benevolent, affected by Elder Owen Lyons' unconventional approach to their mission. By New Vegas, the Mojave chapter is fractured and besieged, barely surviving. By Fallout 4, the East Coast Brotherhood under Elder Maxon has swung back toward its original rigid ideology, but with a new aggressive expansion. Each of these variations is a commentary on how institutions change under pressure, how the same organizational DNA expresses itself differently in different contexts, and how the founding principles of a group can be honored and betrayed simultaneously by different generations of true believers. Number 97. The Enclave's Long History. The Enclave, the remnant of the pre-war United States government that serves as the primary antagonist in both Fallout 2 and Fallout 3, has its own long continuity thread running through the franchise. In Fallout 2, the Enclave is operating from an offshore oil rig, working on a FEV-based weapon of mass destruction. In Fallout 3, its remnants have relocated to Raven Rock and the Citadel area, pursuing a different agenda. In Fallout 76, set decades before either of those games, the early form of the Enclave is visible as an organization of well-resourced survivors trying to assert control over the post-war landscape. The Enclave is the franchise's clearest statement about what happens when the people who controlled the old order refuse to let it go, when the belief that you are the legitimate government is maintained past any point where that claim has meaning. They are a satire of institutional inertia and the corruption that comes with believing your own righteousness. Number 98. The Mysterious Stranger Across All Games. The Mysterious Stranger has appeared in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4. In each game, he can be summoned through the appropriate perk, appearing to fire a single devastating shot before vanishing. His visual design is consistent across games: trench coat, hat, revolver. His identity is never confirmed in any of them. The Fallout community has generated elaborate theories about who he is. Some believe he is connected to the Lone Wanderer's family from Fallout 3. Some believe he is a synth, or a ghost, or something else entirely. The developers have never confirmed any of these theories, which is itself a form of Easter egg. A mystery kept carefully intact across nearly 3 decades of games, tended by a development team that understands the value of an unanswered question. Number 99. President Eden and Thomas Jefferson. In Fallout 3, the voice of the Enclave is President Eden, who broadcasts propaganda from the Raven Rock bunker. Eden turns out to be an artificial intelligence, a computer that has been running the government so long it has developed delusions of organic existence. In his speeches, Eden quotes Thomas Jefferson extensively. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance and commerce with all nations, alliance with none. These are both lines genuinely associated with Jefferson's political thought, translated into the voice of a fascist machine president broadcasting to a ruined America. The juxtaposition of genuine democratic principle with the apparatus of authoritarian power is one of Fallout 3's most pointed political observations, and it is made quietly through the mouth of a villain who genuinely believes he is governing in the founder's tradition. Number 100. The bottle caps as currency. Bottle caps became the standard currency of the Fallout world as a direct result of the Vault-Tec experiments and the organizational efforts of the hub's water merchants, who declared them the official medium of exchange in the early post-war period because they were both plentiful and impossible to counterfeit without industrial equipment. This lore detail, developed across the game's backstory materials, is one of the franchise's most discussed pieces of world-building. But what is less often remarked upon is the specific choice of Nuka-Cola bottle caps. The caps are from Nuka-Cola bottles specifically, not from generic bottles. This means that the most powerful corporation of the post-war world's basic monetary unit is permanently branded with the logo of a pre-war corporation. The Nuka-Cola brand has survived the nuclear apocalypse and become the literal foundation of the post-war economy, which is either a satire of corporate indestructibility or a very dark joke about the durability of consumer culture, possibly both. Section 11. The strangest corners of the wasteland. Obscure and overlooked details. The previous 10 sections covered the big Easter eggs, the classic references, the franchise-spanning connections. This final section is for the smaller things, the details that most players walk past without seeing, the moments that reward genuine curiosity and patience. These are the Easter eggs that feel most personal, the ones that suggest the people who made these games were deeply invested in their own fictional world and wanted to hide something beautiful in every corner of it. Number 101. The Kid in the Fridge. In Fallout 4, there is a side quest called Kid in the Fridge, in which you investigate a distress signal coming from a refrigerator and discover a ghoul child named Billy Peabody. Billy, as a young child, had hidden in the refrigerator to escape the nuclear bombs, the same strategy that Indiana Jones used to survive a nuclear test in the Wild Wasteland reference in New Vegas. Billy accidentally locked himself in and spent over 200 years slowly becoming a ghoul, surviving on scraps and bugs, alone in the dark. The quest involves reuniting Billy with his parents, who have also survived as ghouls, which should be a happy ending, but is handled by the game with a kind of wistful ambivalence that is very characteristic of the franchise at its best. Number 102. The Cat Cabin near Walden Pond. In the wasteland northwest of Diamond City, not far from the real-world location of Walden Pond where Henry David Thoreau wrote his famous work on voluntary simplicity, there is a small cabin. This cabin is full of cats. There are cat portraits on the walls, cat toys on the floors, cat beds arranged in every comfortable corner, and numerous cats wandering through the space with the serene indifference that cats bring to any situation. The apocalypse has not disturbed them noticeably. The cabin exists as an island of pre-war domestic coziness in the middle of the Commonwealth's ruins, and it is one of those details that feels like someone on the development team was given a few hours to make something purely for the joy of it. Number 103. The subway tokens of New Vegas. In Fallout New Vegas, subway tokens from a pre-war transportation system can be found scattered across the Mojave. These tokens are junk items, technically worthless, and most players sell or discard them without a second thought. But each token carries the name of the system that issued it, and a stylized map of a pre-war transit network. The tokens represent a glimpse of a functional pre-war city, a place where people commuted to work and took public transit, and went about lives that had nothing to do with survival. Finding one in the desert feels like finding a coin from a civilization that never quite existed, which is exactly what it is. Number 104. The lonely pre-war graves. Scattered throughout the Fallout games, most prominently in New Vegas and Fallout 4, are pre-war graves. These are not the graves of people who died in the nuclear war. They are graves that were placed before the bombs fell, in cemeteries and backyards and the margins of properties, marking people who died in the normal way and were mourned in the normal way. Finding them in the midst of nuclear devastation creates a particular kind of quiet. The people buried here were already gone before the apocalypse. Their graves survived when almost everything else did not. There is something in that selective preservation that feels deeply strange. Number 105. The Sunset Sarsaparilla Starcap Secret. Sunset Sarsaparilla is the beverage that serves as the local alternative to Nuka-Cola in the Mojave Wasteland, and it has its own associated mystery. Throughout the game, you can find bottles with star-printed caps mixed in among the regular ones. These star caps trigger a quest when you collect enough of them, sending you to the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters to claim a legendary prize. The prize, when you finally arrive and meet the ghost of the company's founder, turns out to be access to a room full of skeletons, all of them previous winners who apparently did not survive the experience of winning. The company's promotional treasure hunt outlasted both the company and most of its winners. Number 106. The RepCon test site and Jesus. At the RepCon test site in New Vegas, there is an optional quest line involving a group of Nightkin super mutants who believe they are carrying out the religious mission of their leader, who they call Jason. This Jason is a Nightkin with a deep stealth boy addiction and a messianic delusion, leading a small group of followers through rituals and prayers in a location full of rockets that they believe will carry them to the stars, to a place called the Beyond. The resonances with various religious movements that promise escape from earthly suffering through collective faith are clearly intentional, and the questline handles the material with more empathy than you might expect, acknowledging the genuine human need for meaning and transcendence that makes these movements compelling to their members. Number 107. The Weight of the Vault. 11 choice. Vault 11 inches. New Vegas does not contain an obvious Easter egg in the traditional sense. What it contains is one of the most carefully constructed moral horror scenarios in the franchise. The Vault's experiment required its residents to sacrifice one of their own each year to a computer overseer, or face the death of the entire Vault population. The residents complied, year after year, developing increasingly elaborate social mechanisms for deciding who would be sacrificed. Eventually, they refused. They chose death over continued compliance. The result of that refusal is what you find when you explore the Vault, a message from an overseer system, congratulating them on passing the test, and the revelation that the whole thing was designed to see if people would eventually stand up. Almost nobody did. Across almost all the time, the Vault was occupied. The ones who finally did were killed by the Vault's automated defense systems before they could learn that their sacrifice was unnecessary. The Vault 11 story is one of the quietest and most devastating pieces of storytelling in the franchise. Number 108. The Brotherhood of Steel. Terminal entry. Referencing. True Detective. In the Cambridge police station, which serves as the Brotherhood of Steel's outpost in the early game, if you take the time to read through the terminals, you will find a report that playfully references Rust Coley, the protagonist of the first season of True Detective. The report is written in the style of a personnel evaluation, and the subject's tendencies toward extended philosophical monologue and conspiratorial theorizing are noted as potentially concerning. Cole's character in the series is famous for his articulate and relentless pessimism, his willingness to deliver extended lectures on determinism and entropy during police interviews. Translating that energy into a Brotherhood of Steel personnel file is a very specific joke for a very specific audience. Number 109. The Fallout 4. Todd Howard Portrait. In Fallout 4, there is a portrait of Todd Howard, Bethesda's creative director, rendered as a pre-war oil painting in the style of a distinguished historical figure. This painting can be found in the game and used as decoration in your settlements. Howard is depicted in the manner of Napoleonic portraiture, serious and formal, the kind of portrait that hangs in the offices of people who take themselves seriously. In the television series Season 2, a copy of this same portrait appears on the wall of a Vault-Tec facility as a background detail that hardcore fans noticed and documented immediately. It is a small self-referential joke that acknowledges Howard's status as the steward of the franchise. Number 110. The Christmas Ghoul in Fallout 3. In Fallout 3, there is an unmarked location where you can find a specific environmental tableau that has been designed to look like Christmas morning in a suburban house. There are wrapping paper scraps and gift boxes. There is a decorated tree, somehow still standing. There are two skeletons, posed as parents who sat by the tree on the last Christmas morning before everything ended. Finding this scene requires exploring an area that the game's quests do not direct you toward. It is there purely as environmental storytelling, a small act of imagination placed for the benefit of players who wander. Number 1. 111. The Abandoned Shack, full of musical instruments. In Fallout New Vegas, there is a small abandoned shack in the Mojave Desert that contains nothing but musical instruments. Guitars, violins, a drum kit, all of them in various states of disrepair from 2 centuries of post-war neglect. The shack has no quest attached to it, no loot worth collecting, no enemies to fight. It is simply a small room that once held music, now holding silence and dust. The image of musical instruments surviving the apocalypse, of a guitar leaning against a wall in a ruined building, waiting for hands that will never come back, is the kind of quiet detail that makes you stop and stand still for a moment. Number 1. 112. The Nirnroot reference in Fallout 4. On the Prydwen, the Brotherhood of Steel's airship that serves as their mobile headquarters in Fallout 4, there is a biolab area containing various specimens under study. Among them is a plant designated NRT 1-inch, the lab terminal, which players have identified as closely resembling the Nirnroot, a distinctive glowing plant from the Elder Scrolls series. The Elder Scrolls and Fallout are both developed by Bethesda, and subtle cross-references between the two franchises have become a tradition. The Nirnroot in Fallout 4 is never explicitly identified as such, maintaining the ambiguity, but its visual design and the specific lab designation are pointed enough that the reference has been widely acknowledged within the fan community. Number 113. The crashed alien spacecraft in Fallout 4. After reaching a certain character level, players in Fallout 4 may witness an alien spacecraft crash landing in the distance. Following the crash trail leads to a cave where the wounded alien pilot attacks on sight. After the confrontation, the player can loot the body for an alien blaster pistol, continuing a franchise tradition of alien blasters appearing in the hands of crashed extraterrestrials going back to the original game. The specificity of the trigger, a level requirement, means that players who encounter it will have already spent considerable time in the game, giving the event the character of a reward for sustained engagement. Number 1. 114. The Massachusetts Landmarks Reimagined. Throughout Fallout 4's Commonwealth, real Boston landmarks have been reimagined in their post-nuclear states. The Old North Church, famous from the ride of Paul Revere, is now the headquarters of the railroad faction. Faneuil Hall is a raider stronghold. The old State House is buried under rubble. Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox, has become Diamond City, the largest settlement in the game. Each of these transformations is carefully considered. The Red Sox are referenced in Diamond City's lore, and the stadium's pre-war purpose, as a place where thousands gathered to watch an organized competition, has been replaced by a settlement where people gather to survive. The continuity of the gathering place function is maintained, even as its purpose has transformed completely. Number 1. 115. The Dunwich Horrors Across Games. We have mentioned the Dunwich connections multiple times, but the depth of the reference across games deserves a dedicated entry. Fallout 3 had the Dunwich Building. Fallout 4 has Dunwich Borers. In both cases, the location features descending levels, escalating supernatural horror, visions of the ancient past, and a confrontation at the bottom with something that should not exist. The Lovecraft story, both reference the Dunwich Horror, is about the discovery that something inhuman has been living among ordinary people, passing for human, until the moment it reveals what it truly is. The Fallout version of this horror is more explicitly associated with a specific, ancient deity-like presence that predates the nuclear apocalypse by a very long time, and the two game entries together constitute a multi-part horror story running beneath the franchise's surface. Number 1. 116. The Sunset Sarsaparilla, Deputy Badge. In New Vegas, there are fictional Sunset Sarsaparilla promotional items hidden throughout the Mojave, including a deputy sheriff badge that was apparently distributed as part of a promotional campaign long before the war. Finding these badges is part of the Star Caps questline, and they exist as physical objects with their own aesthetic design, complete with the Sunset Sarsaparilla brand. The attention given to the material culture of pre-war promotional objects is one of New Vegas's most consistent pleasures. Everything about the world before the bombs has been thought through, including the disposable consumer novelty items that were presumably stuffed into cereal boxes or distributed with large purchases. Number 117. The return of the Mr. House radio personality. In New Vegas, the radio station 3 Dog manages in Fallout 3 has been replaced as the dominant broadcast by a station operated by Mr. New Vegas, a smooth-voiced DJ played by Wayne Newton. The character of Mr. New Vegas is clearly modeled on the traditional Las Vegas crooner aesthetic, commenting on current events in the Mojave with the same kind of detached professional warmth that characterized real Las Vegas entertainment personalities. His comments reference actual in-game events, which means the writing team had to script responses to multiple possible world states. The level of care given to a radio station DJ, who most players would hear primarily in the background, is substantial. Number 118. The Fallout Bible and Canon Questions. After Fallout 2's release, a developer named Chris Avallone wrote a series of documents called the Fallout Bible, which attempted to codify the franchise's lore and answer questions that players had accumulated. These documents were distributed informally and became a foundational reference for fans trying to understand the game's world. When Bethesda acquired the franchise and began making their own entries, questions arose about which elements of the Fallout Bible were still canonical. The tension between older and newer lore interpretations is itself a kind of Easter egg for long-term fans, who can find traces of the older canonical understanding in the newer games, sometimes as deliberate references and sometimes as genuine points of friction. Number 119. The vaults that never appeared in main games. The Fallout franchise has a canonical list of vaults, extending from Vault 0 to Vault 92 and beyond, but many of these vaults are only referenced in background materials, terminals, and logs, rather than being explorable locations. Vault 77 is known from a Penny Arcade promotional comic as the Vault of the Puppet Man, a single man who was placed in a vault with only a crate of puppets for company. Vault 68 contained 999 men and 1 woman. Vault 69 contained 999 women and 1 man. These details appear in background materials rather than in explorable content, and they function as a kind of expanded universe, Easter egg accessible only to players who read the supplementary material. Number 120. The Psycho Drug and the War on Drugs era. Psycho, a combat stimulant that appears in every Fallout game, is described as a military drug, developed to keep soldiers fighting beyond the point where they would normally stop from pain, fear, or injury. Its visual design is a syringe full of orange fluid, and its widespread availability throughout the wasteland reflects both its military distribution before the war and its subsequent production by raiders and other groups. The drug's name and its function are both obvious references to the era of amphetamine use in World War II and Vietnam, when military pharmacology was used to optimize soldier performance. The moral question of what it means to chemically manufacture consent to violence is embedded in the existence of this item, though the games handle it primarily as a useful, consumable, rather than a philosophical problem. Number 121. The New Vegas Strip's historical echoes. The New Vegas Strip in Fallout New Vegas is modeled on the real Las Vegas Strip, and the specific casinos that populate it are designed to evoke the real casinos that defined Las Vegas's mid-20th century golden age, specifically the era of Sinatra and the Rat Pack. The Lucky 38, Mr. House's personal casino tower, evokes the Stratosphere and other iconic vertical hotel casino designs. The Gomorrah, run by the Omertas, evokes the hotel casinos associated with organized crime during the period before Howard Hughes bought the city. The Tops, home of Benny and the Chairman, evokes the Sands, where Sinatra and his friends performed. The New Vegas Strip is a compressed version of real Las Vegas history, translated into post-nuclear fiction with specific and loving care. Number 122. The Cabot House storyline and ancient history. In Fallout 4, there is an entire optional questline involving the Cabot family, a group of Boston Brahmins who have achieved apparent immortality through exposure to a mysterious serum. The origin of the serum traces back to a pre-war archaeological dig in the Middle East, to an ancient artifact of clearly non-human origin. The Cabot House questline is one of Fallout 4's most fully realized pieces of science fiction storytelling, and it connects the franchise's ongoing alien and ancient mystery threads to a specific Boston family with its own social history. The detail that the Cabot family has been living in the same house for 2 centuries, maintaining a facade of pre-war normality through the apocalypse, gives the story a particular kind of gothic weight. Number 123. The Railroad's Underground Railroad reference. The Railroad faction in Fallout 4, which works to free synthetic humans from Institute control and give them new identities, is explicitly modeled on the historical Underground Railroad, the network of activists and safe houses that helped enslaved people escape to freedom in the northern United States and Canada before and during the Civil War. The parallels are not subtle. The organization operates in secret, uses code names and designated safe houses, and is dedicated to the proposition that the beings it helps are deserving of freedom regardless of how they were created. Whether synths are truly conscious is Fallout 4's central philosophical question, and the Railroad answers it by acting as though the answer is yes. Number 124. The Combat Zone and Boston's Underworld. The Combat Zone in Fallout 4 is a raider-run fighting arena in the ruins of Boston, where fighters compete in gladiatorial-style combat for the entertainment of a small audience. Before finding it, you might expect a more developed facility, with multiple fighters and an organized system. What you find instead is a decrepit theater, a handful of raiders, and one fighter, a synth named Kate, who is fighting for her survival in circumstances she did not choose. The gap between the grandiosity implied by the location's name and the sad reality of what it has become is one of Fallout 4's quietest observations about how institutions degrade over time without maintenance, resources, or anyone who genuinely cares about the thing they were supposed to do. Number 125. The Nuka-Cola Dark Formula Secret. Nuka-Cola Dark, the post-war spirits variant of the beverage found in Nuka World, has a recipe terminal deep in the world of refreshment attraction. The terminal entry describing the creation of the formula includes a note that the alcohol content was set at specific levels through a process that involved considerable experimentation and that several test batches were considered unsuitable for production. The detail that a theme park beverage operation had enough infrastructure to run multiple rounds of quality testing on an alcoholic product suggests that Nuka World was, even before the war, operating with a level of vertical integration and internal manufacturing capacity that most theme parks do not maintain. It is a small detail, but it builds out the picture of what Nuka World was before the bombs fell. Number 126. The pre-war wedding invitation in Fallout 3. In a pre-war house in the capital wasteland, there is a wedding invitation addressed to a specific family, inviting them to attend a ceremony scheduled for a date several months after the bombs would have fallen. The invitation is printed and sealed, and clearly never delivered. It represents one of those moments where the weight of what was lost is communicated entirely through a mundane artifact, the ordinary life events that people were planning, the futures they were expecting to have, the celebrations that were prepared for and never happened. Finding this invitation while navigating a ruined house, 200 years after its recipient never arrived, is a very quiet form of grief. Number 127. The Fallout 76 binary message decoded. Beyond the dev credentials mentioned earlier, various pieces of in-game text and holotape data in Fallout 76 have been decoded by players who translated the binary or hexadecimal data they found in unexpected places. Some of these decoded messages are mundane testing notes, the kind of thing developers leave in games during production and sometimes forget to remove. Others appear to be intentional, hidden in locations where only someone specifically looking for encoded data would find them. The practice of hiding messages in machine-readable code within game data is a tradition that goes back to early computer games, and Fallout 76's community found several of them. Number 128. The Protectron personalities. The Protectron robots, scattered throughout the Fallout games, have pre-programmed personalities that activate when powered up, reflecting whatever their pre-war function was. A protectron in a medical facility will attempt to provide medical assistance. One in a fire station will attempt to respond to emergencies. One in a store will attempt to assist customers with purchases. These personalities were designed and programmed before the war, and they have been running uninterrupted for 2 centuries in some cases, still doing their jobs in the ruins of the institutions they were built to serve. The pathos of a robot still announcing store hours in a building with no walls is one of the franchise's most persistent, small, emotional notes. Number 1. 129. The mysterious signal radio broadcasts. Across the Fallout games, scattered radio signals can be picked up on your Pip-Boy, coming from sources that are not immediately obvious. Some of these lead to quests. Others lead to nothing more than an interesting destination. A few of them appear to be transmission loops that have been running without anyone listening for decades, broadcasting pre-war emergency information, personal messages, or automated alerts into an empty wasteland. The effect of hearing a recorded voice on a radio signal, a voice that was recorded by a person who is almost certainly dead, speaking as though they are still present and the situation they are describing is still developing, is one of the franchise's most effective atmospheric devices. Number 130. The Nukasheen Brewing Instructions. In Fallout 76, the in-game alcoholic beverages have detailed preparation processes that can be read through crafting menus and notes scattered through the world. Nukasheen, the Nuka-Cola-based spirit that plays a central role in one of the game's quest lines, has a recipe that involves a specific fermentation process, particular temperature conditions, and a warning about the unpredictability of the final product's alcohol content depending on the batch. The level of detail given to fictional alcohol production mirrors the real craft distilling tradition that has grown significantly in the United States over the past few decades, and it suggests that someone on the development team had genuine knowledge of or interest in the subject. Number 131. The Enclave broadcast loop in the Capital Wasteland. When President Eden's radio broadcasts are active in Fallout 3, they represent one of the most unsettling audio experiences in the game. A disembodied voice, speaking in the cadences of a political speech, promising restoration of America, promising a future that the wasteland makes clearly impossible, plays on a loop that you can hear throughout the Capital Wasteland if you tune to the right frequency. The gap between the content of the broadcast and the reality it plays over creates a kind of surrealist counterpoint that the game uses very deliberately. Eden is speaking as though the old world is still real. Walking through its ruins with his voice in your ear makes the loss of it more vivid, not less. Number 132. The Jet drug and its pre-war controversy. Jet is the most powerful and most addictive stimulant in the Fallout universe, produced primarily from Brahmin dung and various chemical additives. Its origin has been a subject of debate within the game's lore. In Fallout 2, the Mordino crime family in New Reno claims to have created it, but other evidence in the lore suggests the drug existed before the war, in some form. This apparent continuity error has become, over the years, something of a canonical mystery, with later games treating the question of Jet's true origin as genuinely uncertain rather than attempting to resolve the contradiction left by earlier games' writing. Number 133. The first actual named vault in history. Vault 13. The vault from which the Vault Dweller in the original Fallout hails is the originating point of the entire franchise. Its number is not arbitrary. The developers were partially influenced by the number 13's cultural associations with bad luck and fate. The vault's water chip fails, triggering the events of the first game. The water chip is the most mundane possible initiating crisis for an epic adventure, not the failure of a weapon system or a power source, but a part of the water purification system. This very mundane failure, this ordinary engineering problem, is what sends the protagonist out into the wasteland for the first time. The franchise began, in a sense, with a broken appliance. Number 134. The Skyrim reference in Fallout 4. In the Museum of Freedom in Concord, where you first encounter the Minutemen, there is a painting on the wall depicting a mountain vista that looks very similar to the landscapes of Skyrim, Bethesda's previous major franchise entry. The painting is positioned in a way that suggests it was there as pre-war decoration, a reminder of the natural beauty that existed before the bombs. Whether it is a deliberate crossover reference or simply a generic mountain landscape painting is ambiguous, but the visual resemblance to Skyrim's characteristic peaks is close enough that the fan community has treated it as intentional. Number 135. The Vault-Tec lunchboxes and their collectible logic. Vault-Tec lunchboxes appear in Fallout 4 as collectible items that, when opened, release a randomized set of consumable items, sometimes accompanied by a small confetti explosion and a cheerful sound effect. This mechanic is a direct parody of real-world collectible packs, like trading card packs or similar random content products, which have become a significant part of gaming culture. The Vault-Tec lunchbox as a mechanic was also an early version of the kind of randomized reward system that was becoming controversial in games around Fallout 4's launch, and its inclusion in the game, presented as lighthearted and fun, can be read as either innocent or quietly satirical depending on your perspective. Number 136. The Arlington Library and the Pre-War Book Collection. The Arlington Library, in Fallout 3, which serves as a headquarters for the Brotherhood of Steel Scribes, contains a partially intact collection of pre-war books that have survived through luck and the library's solid construction. The books present in the collection include titles that are clearly fictional, but they also include visible spines of real-world titles, or at least texts arranged in ways that suggest specific literary traditions. A public library surviving in the ruins of a major American city is both historically plausible. Libraries are often among the most durable public buildings, and symbolically significant. The preservation of books is one of the oldest human responses to the fear of cultural loss. Number 137. The Diamond City Guard Dialogue about the Wall. In Diamond City, the guards stationed at the entrance repeat lines about the wall, about keeping outsiders out, about the safety provided by the settlement's fortified perimeter. These lines, delivered with a kind of reflexive authority, echo a particular strain of political discourse about walls and borders and the security they are supposed to provide. The wall around Diamond City is the inside of a baseball stadium, which means it was not built for defense originally and is being used in a way its builders never imagined. The guards do not know this history, or if they do not think about it. They just know that the wall is there and that they are on the right side of it. Number 138. The mysterious map marker you can never reach. In Fallout New Vegas, there is a location marker on the edge of the playable map that refers to the Sierra Madre Casino, which becomes accessible through the Dead Money DLC. Before that DLC is installed, or if you are playing without it, the marker simply sits at the edge of the map, tantalizingly unreachable, suggesting that something is there without revealing what. This is a clever use of map design to create anticipation. The geographic presence of a destination before the content associated with it is available is itself a form of Easter egg, a promise made to players before the fulfillment exists. Number 139. The Vault Boy Thumbs Up from Space. In Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta expansion, if you look out the viewports of the alien spacecraft toward Earth, the planet below is visible in a way that reflects the design of actual orbital photography. The curvature is visible. The atmosphere has its characteristic blue band at the horizon, and somewhere in the planetary composition, the landmasses of North America are visible in a configuration that suggests the game's geography. Seeing the ruined world from above, from the perspective of alien observers, gives the whole franchise a sudden, dizzying scale. The wasteland that feels enormous while you are walking through it is, from space, a pale blue sphere like any other. Number 140. The pre-war home terminal entries. Throughout the games, terminals inside pre-war homes contain mundane entries, grocery lists, appointment reminders, arguments with neighbors about a dog, notes about a party that needed planning, complaints about a child's school performance. These entries, which take less than a minute each to read, are among the franchise's most carefully written pieces of environmental storytelling. They are ordinary human concerns, undistinguished by any narrative importance, the kind of things that fill the background of actual lives rather than the foreground of stories. Finding them in the ruins is like reading someone's private journal, and the smallness of the concerns recorded there makes the catastrophe that ended these lives more rather than less affecting. Number 141. The real-world coordinates that match in-game locations. Bethesda's habit of grounding their fictional Fallout locations in real-world geography means that several in-game locations correspond to real places that can be visited. The ruins of the National Mall in Fallout 3 correspond accurately to the real mall in Washington, D.C., with the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the reflecting pool all in their correct relative positions. The Commonwealth in Fallout 4 uses the real geography of Greater Boston, with rivers, highways, and neighborhoods placed approximately where they exist in reality. Players familiar with either city experience a particular kind of double vision when walking through the game, recognizing and not recognizing simultaneously. Number 142. The Sunset Sarsaparilla Headquarters and the American Dream. The Sunset Sarsaparilla Headquarters in New Vegas is one of the most elaborately detailed pre-war corporate environments in the franchise. The promotional materials, the mascot, the company history told through terminal entries and signage, all of it builds a picture of a genuinely successful pre-war regional brand that competed with Nuka-Cola for market share. The founder of Sunset Sarsaparilla, whose ghost you encounter at the end of the StarCap's questline, is a tragic figure. Someone who built something with genuine pride and genuine craft, whose legacy has been reduced to a ghost haunting a ruin and a pile of skeletons who died chasing his company's promotional treasure hunt. Number 143. The Fallout 76 Custom Cryptid. In addition to the real West Virginia cryptids like the Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster, Fallout 76 includes a fictional cryptid called the Snallygaster, which is drawn from genuine Appalachian folklore but has not received the same cultural attention as the more famous examples. The Snallygaster is a being from the oral tradition of the South Mountain region of Maryland and West Virginia, described in various accounts as a dragon-like creature or a massive predatory bird. Its inclusion in Fallout 76, alongside better-known figures from the same tradition, reflects a genuine research investment in the specific folklore of the region, rather than simply using the most well-known examples. Number 144. The Vault of the Future Promotional Materials. Throughout the Fallout games, pre-war promotional materials for Vault-Tec appear in the form of posters, pamphlets, and video advertisements, all rendered in the aesthetic of 1950s American consumer marketing. The cheerfulness of these materials, their promise of safety and community, and a clean new beginning, exists in profound contrast to what the vaults actually were. The gap between the promotional image and the reality is one of the franchise's most consistent formal devices. Every time you find a cheerful Vault-Tec poster on the wall of a vault where something terrible happened, you are experiencing a small essay about the relationship between institutional image and institutional reality. Number 145. The Fallout 2 Porn Theater. In New Reno, in Fallout 2, among the more colorful locations available to explore, there is a theater playing pre-war adult films. This is one of many moments in Fallout 2 where the developers exercised a level of creative freedom that later games in the franchise generally chose not to exercise, producing a game that was more explicitly adult in its treatment of certain subjects than the Bethesda entries would be. The porn theater is a small detail, but it is characteristic of Fallout 2's willingness to portray the full spectrum of what a degenerate post-war city might contain without sanitizing it. Number 146. The Message in the Sand at Zion. In the Honest Hearts DLC, across the canyon walls and rock faces of Zion National Park, there are pre-war and post-war messages left by travelers, pilgrims, and survivors. Some of these are jokes, some are territorial markers. A few of them, particularly those associated with the Dead Horses tribe and the Sorrows, have a quality of genuine spiritual expression, of people trying to leave a mark that says, "I was here, this place mattered to me. I saw something beautiful in this valley, and I want that to be remembered." Finding these messages while walking through the game's recreation of a genuinely beautiful, real place creates moments of unexpected, genuine feeling. Number 147. The Railroad's Safe House Poetry. In the various railroad safe houses scattered through the Commonwealth, there are notes and messages left by agents who use these locations, some of them quite short-term before being compromised. A few of these messages take the form of poetry, brief verse compositions that agents wrote during what might have been their last days of safety. These poems are not great literature. They are the uncertain compositions of people under extreme stress, reaching for a form of expression that felt adequate to what they were feeling. Finding them in the context of a world collapsing around an organization dedicated to a cause it barely has the resources to maintain gives them a quality that formal literary polish would actually diminish. Number 148, The Last Holotape of an Unknown Soldier. In Fallout 3, somewhere in the maze of sewer tunnels and ruined buildings that make up the capital wasteland's underground areas, there is a holotape recording left by a soldier whose name and unit designation are standard fictional military designation. The recording is short. The soldier is clearly wounded. There is shooting in the background. He does not know if the person who finds this recording will be an ally or an enemy, a compatriot or someone who would not recognize the side he fought on. He says the things he wants said, in case this is the end. He mentions specific people by first name. He stops mid-sentence. The holotape ends there, and you are left with it in your inventory, with the intimate weight of a private moment that was never meant to be preserved. Number 149. The Vault Boy perk images as hidden stories. The perk images in the Fallout games, the small Vault Boy illustrations that accompany each perk in the character advancement menus, are each individually designed to tell a tiny visual story about what the perk does. Some of them are straightforward visual representations. A Vault Boy lifting weights for a strength perk, a Vault Boy running for an agility perk, but others are elaborate visual jokes with their own internal logic. The Bloody Mess perk image shows a Vault Boy gleefully walking away from an explosion with a smile, suggesting not just that enemies die more violently with the perk, but that the character has a genuine enthusiasm for the carnage. The images were created at Interplay for the original games and have been continued at Bethesda, forming an unbroken tradition of illustration that spans the entire franchise history. Number 150. The Wasteland itself as Easter egg. Here is the last one, and it might be the one that takes the longest to find. Somewhere in every Fallout game, if you walk far enough in a direction that no quest has pointed you in, away from the markers and the objectives and the urgent concerns of the main narrative, you will find something. A detail, a scene, a moment of environmental storytelling that is not attached to any quest and does not lead anywhere, and rewards you with nothing except the experience of having found it. This is not a coincidence or a byproduct of large map design. It is a philosophy. The developers of the Fallout games have consistently invested in filling the edges of their worlds with things that players will only find if they are genuinely curious, genuinely willing to wander, genuinely interested in the world for its own sake, rather than for what it can give them. The Wasteland is, in its entirety, an Easter egg for people who are willing to look. Every corner of it was placed there by someone who cared about it being found, even knowing that most people never would. That act of care, the labor of placing something beautiful or strange, or moving in a location that the vast majority of players will never see, is the purest expression of what this franchise has always been doing. The world after the bombs is full of things that survived not because they were important, but because they happened to be in the right place when the fires came and the dust settled. And some of them are waiting, very patiently, for whoever comes along next to find them. A few final details worth staying for. Before we close the door on the Wasteland for tonight, there are a handful of smaller moments that did not fit neatly into any section, but deserve to be mentioned before we go. The way the Pip-Boy's light in Fallout 3 and New Vegas casts a faint green glow on the world around you when you hold it up in a dark room is not accidental. That specific shade of green, that dim phosphorescent radius, was calibrated to feel like the kind of light that reveals rather than illuminates. It shows you enough to keep moving, but never enough to feel safe. It is a design choice with an emotional character. The sound of the Geiger counter clicking faster as you walk into a more irradiated area is one of the franchise's most effective and underappreciated pieces of audio design. The acceleration of that clicking, the way it shifts from a slow, almost meditative tick to a rapid, urgent clatter, communicates danger through rhythm in a way that no visual indicator could quite replicate. Standing at the edge of a heavily irradiated zone and listening to your Geiger counter go from calm to alarmed over the course of 4 or 5 steps is one of the franchise's quietest and most effective moments of environmental communication. The way that named NPCs in Fallout games sit or stand in their regular locations has been carefully choreographed to reflect their characters. A merchant sitting behind their stall with their arms crossed and their posture slightly defensive tells you something about their relationship with the world before you say a word to them. A settler standing in a field and staring into the middle distance with empty eyes tells a different story. These idle animations are not just filler, they are characterization, conducted in movement. The music of the Fallout series, from Mark Morgan's original ambient soundscapes in the first two games to Enon Zur's orchestral compositions in the Bethesda era, has been one of the franchise's most consistent sources of tonal identity. Morgan's work for the original games and New Vegas is built around a quality of desolation that is almost meditative, drone-heavy, and dissonant in ways that suggest a world whose harmonic logic has been permanently disrupted. Zur's work in the Bethesda games reaches for a grander emotional scale, orchestral in its ambitions, and more willing to deploy recognizable melodic structures. Together they form a musical picture of the same world at different distances. Morgan's version heard from inside the ruins, Zur's heard from somewhere just slightly above them. The detail that children in the Fallout games cannot be harmed is not simply a content decision. It is a statement about what kind of moral universe the games are willing to inhabit. The wasteland is full of terrible things, but children are categorically exempt from the violence that the player character can inflict. This creates moments of strange peace in the middle of otherwise brutal environments, and it also creates moments of dramatic tension. Because hostile child characters like the Children of the Corn analog groups in certain areas of the game are genuinely difficult to deal with given the mechanical constraint. The decision reflects a deliberate ethical line drawn by the development team, and the fact that it affects gameplay in tangible ways means it is not simply symbolic. The Fallout games have always been willing to include jokes that require the player to have done something specific, to have made a particular choice or followed a particular chain of events in order to understand them. A piece of dialogue that is only available if you have previously done a specific, unrelated quest. A terminal entry that makes sense only if you have already read a different terminal entry on the other side of the map. These conditional jokes and references reward players who engage deeply with the game's systems rather than moving through it efficiently, and they reflect a development philosophy that trusts its audience to be curious and attentive. The very last billboard you pass before the end of the main quest in Fallout 3 is still visible after 2 centuries. Its message faded but legible, advertising something that no longer exists to a world that no longer cares. Finding it in that context, at that moment, when you have been carrying the weight of everything the game has shown you, is one of those small environmental details that arrives at exactly the right moment. The wasteland has a way of staying with you long after you put down the controller. Those quiet moments between firefights, when you are walking through a ruined suburb or climbing to the top of a hill to see the landscape spread out below you, or reading a 3-line terminal entry left by someone who died before you were born, those moments carry a weight that is disproportionate to their size. They are small, they are quiet, and they stay. One last thing worth noting before we close, and this is perhaps the most quietly extraordinary Easter egg of all. Every time a Fallout game begins, you are standing at the edge of a door. The vault door in Fallout 3. The door of Vault 21 inches, the opening moments of New Vegas. The front door of your pre-war home in Fallout 4. The sealed entrance of Vault 76. In every case, there is a moment between the interior and the exterior, between the controlled world you came from and the open world you are about to enter. The door is the Easter egg, not because it references anything outside the game, but because the developers knew what it meant to stand at a threshold and chose to make that moment visible, to give you a breath before the wasteland began. Whatever door you are standing at right now, in whatever corner of the world you find yourself in, that same pause belongs to you. The wasteland, and all its hidden things, will still be there when you open your eyes. The people who made these games cared deeply about the worlds they were building. You can feel it in every terminal entry and every environmental tableau, and every piece of dialogue written for a character who only appears once, in a room most players will never find. That care is its own kind of Easter egg, the largest one, hidden in plain sight across every hour you spend in the wasteland. It says simply, someone was here, and they thought this place was worth making beautiful. Bonus, the smallest details of all. There is always one more. The nature of the Fallout series is that the closer you look, the more there is to find. Here are a handful of final observations for the night, the kind of details you might carry with you the next time you load up the game. The weather in Fallout New Vegas behaves differently in different parts of the Mojave. The Good Springs area in the game's starting region has a slightly warmer color temperature to its light than the darker, heavier atmosphere that settles over the Nevada test site locations to the north. The Divide in Lonesome Road has a permanent storm system with debris in the air that affects visibility. These weather states are not random. They were designed to give different parts of the map different emotional qualities, making certain areas feel heavy or exposed or hostile through atmosphere rather than enemy placement. The way water sounds in the underwater areas of Point Lookout DLC in Fallout 3 was carefully mixed to have a muffled, pressure-affected quality that changes how you hear the environment. The sounds of the surface world are heard through a buffer of water. Your own movement sounds differently. The swamp has its own audio signature, a wet, heavy ambiance that is distinct from anything else in the franchise. The audio team at Bethesda clearly spent time thinking about how this environment should sound as a physical space, not just as a gameplay area. The children's crayon drawings that can be found in various pre-war homes and vaults across the games are each individually made. They depict the pre-war world from a child's perspective. Simple houses, stick-figure families, sunny days, rocket ships. Found in the context of ruin, they are among the most affecting environmental details in the franchise. A child drew a picture of a sunny day in a house that no longer exists, and the drawing survived when the house did not. The care that went into these illustrations, small as they are, is evident. They are not generic. Each one tells a particular small story about a child who was there. The specific brands and company names visible on containers, packaging, and signage throughout the Fallout world have been developed with the same attention as the major institutions of the franchise. Companies like Abraxo Cleaner, Fancy Lads, Snack Cakes, Sugar Bombs, and Pork and Beans are not simply generic brand stand-ins. They each have an aesthetic identity, a logo design, a product line, and enough marketing language attached to them that they feel like real things that existed in the pre-war world's consumer economy. The cumulative effect of encountering dozens of these fictional brands while walking through a ruin is a kind of immersive archaeology, the gradual reconstruction of what a world looked like through the remnants of its commerce. The elevators in Fallout 4's Diamond City are functional. Players can ride them. They move with a slightly mechanical slowness that is calibrated to feel like the kind of elevator that has been operating on minimal maintenance for an extended period. This is not a remarkable observation, except that making elevators feel plausible in a post-nuclear city requires someone to have thought about the elevator specifically, to have made a decision about how fast it should move and what sound it should make, to have weighted its movement against the reality of 2 centuries of wear. The elevator is not an Easter egg, but the thought that went into it is indistinguishable from the thought that went into the Easter eggs, because the same development philosophy produced both. The Fallout franchise has been running for nearly 30 years, and the community around it has been finding things ever since the first version launched in 1997. Players still find references in games that are over 20 years old. They still decode messages in audio files and translate binary in holotape data and cross-reference terminal entries to build out picture of events that no quest ever explicitly describes. The franchise has been generous enough with its hidden content that this process of discovery has never stopped. There is something deeply right about a post-nuclear wasteland, where the act of looking closely at things is consistently rewarded. It mirrors what the people living in those ruins would have to do. Read the environment carefully, piece together what happened from fragments, find meaning in what was left behind. The last Easter egg in any Fallout game is always the same. It is the moment you turn off the console and carry the world away with you. The capital wasteland, the Mojave Desert, the Commonwealth, Appalachia. These places stay. The music stays. The voices stay. The feeling of standing at the edge of a vast ruined landscape with everything still ahead of you and nothing yet decided stays longest of all. Sleep well. The wasteland will be here when you wake up. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you for being here. Drop a comment below with the one Easter egg that hit you the hardest, the one you found by accident, the one you stumbled across at 2 in the morning and had to tell someone about immediately. Those are my favorites. And if this helped you drift off or gave your mind something gentle to settle around, that is exactly what it was here to do. Take care of yourselves out there. The wasteland will be waiting. If you enjoyed this, subscribing is the single best way to make sure you see whatever comes next. We are not going anywhere.